Chapter 8:11. They supported each other as they tried their best to stand up. But their mental exhaustion had already reached its peak. Perhaps someone only needed to poke them with a finger, and they would immediately collapse from fatigue. Arbor's lips curled as she swept them a glance. You guys aren't bad. Manly enough. Whether or not Balon City can hold on will all depend on you guys. Crown Princess, I'm not a man, but I can still crawl. A hoarse female voice came from behind the crowd. It was a very thin and petite woman, who looked to be in her early 20s. Even though she was panting from exhaustion, her eyes were exceptionally bright and spellbound. Arbor raised her eyebrows. Of course, us women aren't inferior to any men. The woman laughed out loud and kicked the man next to her. Did you see that? The Crown Princess is praising me. I owe you, wretch. You still want to compete with me at this point. The man shook his head speechlessly. Arbor turned to look at Emolien. The latter's eyes brightened slightly, and she hurriedly walked to her side and asked with a smile, What do you need me to do, Jojo? Arbor raised her hand and took out a jar of medicinal liquid from her inner world, tossing it to the mystic cultivators. Drink a mouthful. It can help you replenish your mystic energy as quickly as possible. Mystic cultivators recovered their mystic energy abnormally slowly, especially after it was depleted. It was even more difficult to recover it after it was depleted, and it could even damage their mystic meridians. Hence, when she had nothing to do, she had always been silently researching the mystic returning medicinal liquid. This jar could only be considered a semi-finished product, and wasn't truly complete. According to her conjecture, it was still missing 2 key medicinal ingredients. However, this semi-finished product was already pretty good, and drinking it would only bring benefits to the recovery of mystic energy. After drinking it, I need you guys to do this. Arbor beckoned to everyone, and the 100 mystic cultivators gathered around with a whoosh. After Arbor said this, everyone nodded and looked at the jar. There wasn't much medicinal liquid in that jar, so everyone consciously only drank a mouthful. Once the medicinal liquid entered his mouth, he knew whether it was good or bad. With just one mouthful, the nearly exhausted profound energy in his body began to surge back. At this moment, all of them had excited looks on their faces, as they looked at the Crown Princess excitedly. His profound energy's recovery speed had increased by more than 10 times. Arbor naturally saw that the effect of the profound restoring liquid was pretty good. Unfortunately, she didn't have a lot of semi-finished liquid, and only had 2 jars in total. She took out another jar, and handed it to the female mystic cultivator. This is for you to use after you're done. Now, I need all of you to gather your strength and follow me. Yes. Everyone strode forward, their voices shaking the city gate tower. Arbor grabbed Emolien's hand and called out, Da-Ching. The 2 of them soared into the air and climbed onto the back of Qing Wan. Hearing a cry, everyone looked up and saw a blue ancient divine bird carrying the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess out of the city gate tower. It spread out its beautiful wings and left a trail of green light in the air. Everyone, don't just stand there, go. A mystic cultivator raised his arm and roared. Everyone raised their spirits and followed him to the edge of the city wall. The 100 mystic cultivators level 5 and above simultaneously circulated the profound energy in their bodies and abruptly blasted it toward the ground. Bang! 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 Following this, the ground rumbled. Below the city wall, the 100 zombies were smashed to pieces by the mystic cultivators on the city gate tower, and a row of densely packed pits appeared in front of the city wall. Chapter 8:12. Qingwan suddenly cried out in the air and swooped down. It stopped when it was 7 to 8 meters from the ground and hovered in midair. The group of dim-witted zombies below noticed the abnormal movement above their heads. They raised their swollen and rotten heads and stretched out their withered branch-like arms to grab at Qingwan in midair while roaring. Unfortunately, they couldn't reach it. Arbor stood on Qingwan's back and looked down at the group of zombies, before exchanging a glance with the Crown Prince beside him. The Crown Prince nodded and took out 2 barrels of kerosene from his inner world with a flip of his hand. He handed one of the barrels to Arbor. The 2 of them then began to pour the kerosene into the densely packed pits below. After pouring, They directly smashed the barrels on the zombies' heads, causing 2 of their heads to explode. At this time, City Lord Lin was leading a group of people to repair the holes in the city gate. More than a dozen body cultivators wearing thick armor blocked the front of the crowd like shields. They were constantly swinging their large swords and chopping at the limbs and heads of the zombies that burrowed out of the holes like they were chopping vegetables. At the most intense moment of the battle at the city gate, this savage couple started a great performance that inspired the citizens. A wisp of purple flame seeped out of Emolien's fingertip, and she abruptly threw it into one of the pits. The moment the flame came into contact with the kerosene, it exploded with a whoosh. A row of fire fiercely burrowed out from the ground. Under Emolien's control, the fire burned fiercely. In less than a second, a row of enchanting purple fire walls burned out. The fire walls that were as tall as a person successfully blocked the zombies' path. Although the zombies' bodies had mutated, and they didn't feel any pain, they were still mortal bodies after all. A row of purple flames built a line of defense in front of the city gate, successfully stopping them in their tracks. Moreover, the bottom was supported by kerosene, so it didn't consume much of Emolien's spiritual energy. This method worked. His little girl was truly smart. This was much faster and more powerful than directly consuming large amounts of fire spiritual energy to deal with tens of thousands of zombies. Hundreds of zombies standing in front of the fire walls that couldn't dodge in time were directly burned to ashes by the purple flames. The mystic cultivators on the city gate tower erupted in intense cheers. Such a method could really hold off the corpse puppet army for a period of time. If they wanted to pass through, they would have to pass through the wall of fire. But under the purple flames, how could they remain unharmed? Emolien raised her hand and stroked the little girl's fluffy head. A smile flashed across the corner of her mouth. City Lord Lin also saw everything through the hole in the city gate, and immediately shouted with trembling hands, "Everyone hurry!" Taking advantage of this opportunity, he cleared out the remaining corpse puppets. "We have to repair the city gate and hold on. Commander Hui and Marquis Zhao will be here soon to save us." A series of blood-boiling roars erupted from within the city gates. Everyone increased their strength and hacked at the corpse puppets that had entered the city, quickly repairing the holes. Rumble! At the same time, Zhao Sheng led thousands of armored elite soldiers and arrived before Huifeng. When the people on the city gate tower saw that the elite soldiers had arrived, they burst into cheers. The mystic cultivators drank the second bottle of mystic restoring medicinal liquid and began to gather their strength to carry out the second round of smashing the ground. This was to prevent the first layer of fire from being extinguished, so that the second layer of fire could be replaced in time. But from the looks of it now, it probably wasn't necessary. Zhao Sheng, clad in armor, took the lead and led a group of elite soldiers to clear out the large number of zombies on the field from the rear. Chapter 8:13. Horsehooves galloped, kicking up dust and sand. The Marquis of Stability, Zhao Sheng, and his 2 sons were both brave and skilled in battle. The 3,000 elite troops charged through the zombie army's camp with unstoppable force. Like a sharp blade, they stabbed straight into the enemy's rear and carried out a large-scale cleanup. Zhao Sheng had already seen His Highness the Crown Prince standing on Qinghuan's back. Seeing that the prince was safe and unperturbed from afar, he naturally let out a sigh of relief. The large machete in his hand slaughtered the zombies with even greater force. "Your Highness, Uncle the Crown Princess and I are both fine." "Good, good." Zhao Sheng made a hand gesture, having the 3,000 elite troops split into 10 groups to clean up the nearby zombies. At this time, Huifeng and He Tian had also arrived with 2,000 royal guards. They cupped their hands at Prince Emo from afar, and then led their troops into the heavy encirclement of the zombies. Immediately, Bailon City was filled with cheers. Both inside and outside the city were of one mind, as they spared no effort to kill the zombies. The zombies that were originally climbing the city gate, like a human pyramid, were shot down by the cannons, while the remaining ones had their heads blown up by the arrows. The zombies between the firewall and the city gate had all been cleaned up. Lin Yongyi ran up the city gate tower and couldn't help but feel his scalp turn numb when he saw the mountain of zombie corpses piled up inside the fire wall. If the zombie corpses were piled up a little higher, they would be able to climb up the city gate, using that mountain of corpses and sea of blood. From the looks of it, after this battle ended, his Balon City's city gate still had to be reinforced and raised. City Lord Lin had already thought of the post-war construction of the city's defenses, so he buried this heavy load at the bottom of his heart and raised his arm to shout, "Come! All mystic cultivators gather for another wave. Let's clear the path forward for our brothers. Cannoneers and archers, get ready. Fight for Balon City. Fight for Balon City." Everyone on the city gate tower who still had a breath left roared. The mystic cultivators carried out the last wave of attacks, releasing waves of mystic energy that shot towards the densest group of zombies below the city gate tower. The cannoneers and archers had also finished their last round, and all of their ammunition and arrowheads had been exhausted. The mystic cultivators collapsed on the ground in exhaustion. They could no longer move a finger. From below the city tower came the sound of 5,000 cavalrymen sweeping through the battlefield and the neighing of war horses. The ordinary soldiers wiped their sweaty faces and leaned on the city walls to watch, shouting hoarsely. Wenren Ningjing was also shocked by this scene. The anger in his heart had long been thrown to the back of his mind under such a hot-blooded situation. She turned around and said to the two doctors from the Celestial Medicine Valley, who were watching with folded arms, "What are you guys still standing there for? Help save people." "Miss Jing." The two doctors were surprised. They had clearly fallen out with the Crown Princess just now. So why did the Celestial Medicine Valley still have to help treat Balon City's citizens and civilians? Saving lives is the duty of a doctor. Wenren Ningjing rolled up her sleeves and helped an ordinary soldier covered in blood up, beginning to treat him. Kong Rumio was Wenren Ningjing's diehard fan. Although she was also a bit indignant, she was used to obeying Wenren Ningjing's orders. As a result, she was the first to run up and help Wenren Ningjing administer acupuncture and feed medicine. Those two doctors still wanted to say something, but when they saw Wenren Ningjing's cold gaze, they stifled the words in their hearts and went to save the patient with taut faces. In the end, they were still a bit unhappy, so they didn't control their strength. Chapter 8:14. Only after Wenren Ningjing frowned and glanced at them from the corner of her eyes did the two become slightly better. While helping, Kong Rumio couldn't help but mutter, "Little Jing, that crown princess is so arrogant, so why should we help her?" "Are we helping her?" Wenren Ningjing pursed her lips. She nimbly cleaned the wound and wrapped the gauze around the soldier's arm. "This is a doctor's instinct. Regardless of how much enmity we have with that arrogant and rude crown princess, this has nothing to do with the doctor's duty. Business is business, private is private. We're saving people." "Oh." Kong Rumio pursed her lips and handed a pair of scissors to Wenren Ningjing. Wenren Ningjing cut off the excess gauze and said to the soldier, "The wound can't touch water for the next 2 days. Recuperate well, and you'll get better." "Many thanks, doctor." The young soldier blushed and stuttered. Wenren Ningjing nodded and stood up. When she turned around and saw little Six Zheng walking over, she couldn't help but look a bit embarrassed. Previously, she really thought that little Six Zheng's wound would mutate and become infected, which was why she insisted on taking care of little Six Zheng and wasn't deliberately targeting him. Later, after the Crown Princess's bullshit experiment, she realized that their newly inflicted wounds wouldn't mutate their bodies. Back then, after her chin was cut by the Crown Princess, she really was on tenterhooks for a full 2 hours, and the fear and depression in her heart had almost reached its peak. Later, reality proved that what the Crown Princess said was indeed true. She didn't mutate, and little Six Zheng was still fine. Why didn't his wound mutate like before? Wenren Ningjing didn't know the reason. She was just naive and unaffected but not stupid. She felt that Arbor knew the reason, but judging from the Crown Princess's stoic, domineering, and arrogant appearance, she didn't seem like someone who would kindly dispel her doubts. "My apologies." Wenren Ningjing pursed her lips and weakly said this. Then, almost not daring to look at little Six Zheng's reaction, she ran to the next patient. Little Six Zheng was slightly taken aback. Soon after, he halted his steps and turned to look at Wenren Ningjing. Wu Xiaoan, who was following behind him, immediately grumbled. "TSK, just saying sorry and it'll be over. If it wasn't for the crown princess stopping them in time, your life would have been lost." Sixth Zheng glanced at Wu Xiaoan. Seeing the siblings, Hui Fan and Hui Ling, walking straight over, he politely nodded at them. Sixth Zheng. Hui Ling ran over and stopped several steps away from little Sixth Zheng. I heard that you were injured. Are you okay? Io, Hui Ling. Why are you only showing your concern now? What could possibly happen to the sixth young master? Didn't he see that the sixth young master was still alive and kicking? But Hui Ling, you're too slow to realize this. By the time you realize that sixth young master is fine, I reckon that sixth young master's corpse will be cold. Hui Ling's finger moved, and a cold dagger flew towards the screaming Wu Xiaoan. You cheap mouth, who's talking to you? Sixth Zheng picked up the slightly plump youth and flung him aside. Wu Xiaoan, that guy almost crashed into the city wall. Grimacing in anxiety, he turned around and stomped his foot while shouting, "What are you doing? Look, look, what's that?" The soldier lying on the city wall suddenly pointed to the sky and shouted. Everyone looked up at the sky one after another, only to see a huge flying mystic beast charging straight at the Qinghuan that the crown princess was riding. Chapter 8:15. Mystic Beast. It's a mystic three-eyed condor. Its attack power is very ferocious. It's the overlord of the sky, the king of level 13 mystic beasts. No, that's not right. Quickly look. How can there be a mystic beast with such a strange appearance? It's a three-eyed corpse condor. It's mutated. Amidst everyone's cries of alarm, that three-eyed corpse condor brandished its sharp black claws at Emolien and Arbor. It was extremely likely that its claws would tear apart a person's skin and flesh. Screech. Qinghuan screeched, and a wing parried its attack. The three-eyed corpse condor was forced to fly back a few feet, but it was ready to attack. It only took a split second for it to let out a shrill cry, and its long sharp beak pecked at Qinghuan's head. At this time, its jet-black wings had already decayed to the point that not even 2 feathers remained. When it flapped its wings, bits of flesh would fall down from time to time. Suddenly, its featherless wings fiercely flapped, and gusts of fierce wind blew. Get down! On the city gate tower, Sixth Zheng casually grabbed Hui Ling's shoulder and pushed her down a bit. The two of them quickly found a place to hide. All of a sudden, the sand and dust on the ground were swirled up by the fierce wind, seriously obstructing the line of sight of the 5,000 elite soldiers killing the corpses. The edge of the city wall was also destroyed by the frightening wind, and pieces of gravel were forcibly torn out, falling into the crowd one after another. Everyone helped each other as they rolled and crawled to escape to a corner of the wall, avoiding the three-eyed corpse condor's attack. Arbor's gaze was ice-cold as he looked at this beast wantonly churning in the sky. He slightly raised his wrist, and a circle of binding talismans flew to the three-eyed corpse condor's side with whooshing sounds. They heavily wrapped around the three-eyed corpse condor, forming a talisman array. Talisman power overflowed in all directions, tightly trapping that extremely noisy three-eyed corpse condor in the center of the circle. The three-eyed corpse condor dashed left and right within the talisman array, occasionally letting out hissing sounds. A green vine drilled out from Arbor's sleeve, and it directly whipped at the three-eyed corpse condor. With several whooshing sounds, the three-eyed corpse condor was whipped to the ground by the green vine, and it continuously fell down, smashing into the place where a group of corpses were gathered. Boom! The three-eyed corpse eagle struggled to continue its flight, but it was suddenly struck by a purple flame. Flames rose from its body and spread to a large group of zombies. The three-eyed corpse eagle roared as it rolled about on the ground covered in sand and dust. In the end, it was burned into a pile of ashes, and the corpse puppets that were caught in the fire also turned into ashes without exception, vanishing into thin air. At this moment, a loud rumble came from afar and thick smoke billowed. Arbor stood on the back of the blue Yuan and looked down from the sky. He saw a white dot jumping closer and closer. Emolien snorted and smirked. He's here too. By now, Arbor had also clearly seen the person's figure. The huge seven-tailed celestial fox swept its tail, sweeping away the surrounding corpse puppets. Duan Yu was currently standing on the seven-tailed heavenly fox's back, as he tossed a pellet-sized firearm towards the zombie horde. Bang! Thick smoke came out again, mixed with the stench of burning. A series of crackling sounds could be heard. The seven-tailed heavenly fox suddenly leaped into the air, and its forelimbs swiped twice in the air as it swiftly ran to Blue Wan's side. The two gigantic beasts looked at each other. Prince Mo, you're actually completely unscathed. Duan Yu waved his claws, but before Mo Lian could retaliate, he turned his gaze to Arbor. Jojo, don't be scared, don't be scared. I've come to save you. Chapter 8:16. Haha. Mo Lian snorted. Why are you joining in the fun? Go play on the side. Duan Yu glanced at him and ignored him. He continued to speak to Arbor. Jojo, you must be tired out these 2 days. Look at how pale your little face is. Leave this to me. Go back and rest. Arbor glanced at him. To be precise, he was looking at the seven-tailed heavenly fox that was the size of a small mountain. Duan Yu stroked the seven-tailed heavenly fox's head and looked at Arbor with a grin. Isn't our family's chestnut very big and very cute? Come chestnut, greet Jojo. The seven-tailed heavenly fox extended a large furry paw and waved it at Arbor. Without warning, Arbor suddenly jumped over Qingwan's body. His figure soared into the air as he extended a small, fair hand and grasped one of the seven-tailed heavenly fox's toes. Mo Lian and Duan Yu were both dumbfounded. This was? He really had to shake Chestnut's hand and greet him. Prince Mo only felt like his heart had been struck by something. Heavens, his darling was so adorable. Any random strange action could cause ripples in his heart. Duan Yu's porcelain-white face flushed red, and he suddenly covered his face. Our dear seven-tailed heavenly fox also froze, unsure whether it should quickly withdraw its paw. In front of the seven-tailed heavenly fox, the little girl before them was as slender and weak as a flower. The mountain-like seven-tailed heavenly fox could crush her to death with a single toe. This scene was too beautiful, and everyone couldn't bear to look straight at it. At some point, Sixth Zheng had already stood up from the city wall, and was somewhat spellbound as he stared at the little girl with a smile in front of the snow-white seven-tailed heavenly fox. Why did he have a strange feeling that the little girl shouldn't have such an icy stoic face? As if that he had once seen her most beautiful smile. This feeling was too strange, wasn't it? Qingwan flapped its wings and shrieked at its companions on Paradise Planet. Oh no! There's a flirtatious slut here to steal Master Silver. Qiu, Dian, little white snake, quickly come out and kill it. Unfortunately, Paradise Planet was completely silent. At this moment, no one could come out and kick the seven-tailed heavenly fox to death. Blue Wan flapped her wings and cried out in alarm. Master Silver, Master Silver. Why did he feel that Master Silver would be abducted by this damned fox? On the other side, the situation on the battlefield was largely under control. Mo Lian didn't need to worry about the rest, leaving it to Zhao Sheng and Hui Feng to clean up. In the end, the fire outside Bailon City burned for an entire night before it finally destroyed all of the filth. While Marquis Zhao and Commander Hui were cleaning up the remnants of the battlefield, Prince Mo dispatched Xiao Yi to lead a group of people to investigate the abandoned villages near Bailon City. Sure enough, they found traces of an underground village under another village. However, the underground village had long been deserted. Everyone had retreated. However, based on the traces left behind in the burned buildings, they could deduce that there had been a large number of corpse puppets here not long ago. This news was undoubtedly shocking. Xiao Ye's group was worried that they might have overlooked something, so they investigated the vicinity for an entire day and night before returning to the city to report the details. After Prince Mo finished listening to them with an indecipherable expression, he wrote a personal order and arranged for it to be transmitted to all of the fortifications in the entire country. Now, not only did they have to speed up the preparation of water sources, but they also had to dispatch city defense teams to investigate the villages as soon as possible. Chapter 8:17. At this time, Xiaomu was looking at the incessantly bawling bald child with a headache. She feebly raised her hand to rub his bald head. Don't cry. Arbor sighed. She reached out and carried him onto her lap, patting his back. You monks also cry. Monks are also human. Of course we cry when we're unhappy. The little monk retorted in a childish voice. Benefactress, do you know your mistake? The corner of Arbor's mouth twitched. What mistake did she know? You promised my master that you would take care of me. But ever since we entered the city, you left me in the room and didn't even look at me. The more the little baldy spoke, the more upset he became. He was sobbing. Arbor was at her wit's end. She raised her hand and patted his head. All right, don't cry. I've been busy these past 2 days. The little baldy bit his little sleeve and sobbed. I'm starving to death, benefactress. Call me sister. Her eyelids twitched when she heard him call her motherfucking benefactress, but the little baldy's cries were earth-shattering. Arbor resisted the urge to run out of the door. She waved her hand and took out a juicy peach from her inner world and stuffed it into his arms. All right, don't cry. This is your compensation. The little baldy sobbed as he hugged the peach. He raised his pair of watery eyes and asked pitifully, Just one? It's not enough. What have you been doing these past few days? Arbor rolled her eyes. She took out 2 vegetarian dishes and a bowl of rice from the food box and asked, Do you want to eat red braised pork? The little monk's face flushed red. He hurriedly closed his eyes and waved his hand while hugging the peach. Not eating. Take it away. Arbor laughed at him. You little monk, your 6 senses are obviously not pure. I haven't even taken it out yet, and you don't even dare to look at it. Who knows, if I really take it out, you'll pounce on it and eat it happily. Benefactress, don't say that. The little monk widened his pair of cute eyes and glared at Arbor angrily. Could it be that you're not? If you don't have meat in your heart, you won't be able to see meat in your eyes. Eating meat is just eating vegetables. If you have meat in your heart, you can eat radish as meat too. Arbor snappily picked up a radish with his chopsticks and stuffed it into the little monk's mouth. What? You haven't eaten for the past 2 days. Are you going on a hunger strike? That's not it. The vegetarian dishes they make are not to my taste at all. The little monk swallowed a mouthful of white radish and was so angry that his face turned red. Benefactress, men and women shouldn't touch each other. Don't hug me again. When Prince Emo entered the room, he happened to hear this sentence. His figure flashed, and he picked up the little fellow. The little monk's limp arms and legs trembled as he struggled with all his might to get off the ground. His pair of black eyes stared angrily at Emo Lien. Benefactor, you're too violent. Quickly put me down, or else you will regret it. Oh, then tell me, how will I regret it? Emo Lien pursed her lips and faintly glanced at the little monk. The little monk widened his round eyes, and his face was filled with indignation. I want to pee. Arbor was amused by this big and small duo. Emo Lien turned to look at him, and her phoenix eyes suddenly lit up. Seeing that the little monk had amused Jojo, she decided not to bicker with him. Emo Lien loosened her grip, and saw the little monk running towards Arbor. Benefactress, bring me to pee. Emo Lien wanted to slap this brat to death, but the smile on Arbor's lips instantly froze. Chapter 8:18. Emo Lien's lips pursed into a straight line, and she walked up to pick up the little monk in displeasure. I'll take you there. Don't. You're so fierce, I can't pee in front of you. The little baldy angrily shouted while kicking his legs. Emo Lien was amused. Don't worry, pee as much as you want. I'm not interested in looking at you. I don't want you. I want benefactress, wah. The little monk wailed pitifully. Duan Yu, who had just entered, couldn't help but be taken aback when he saw this. He snatched the little monk from Duan Yu's hands and glanced at him with a smile. You're so promising, even bullying a child. Emo Lien rolled her eyes at him. You came just in time. I'll leave him to you. Take him to pee. Duan Yu was dumbfounded. He looked down at the kicking little monk, and then at the expressionless Emo Lien. Could he return this hot potato? Benefactress. The little monk looked at Duan Yu with disdain. I don't want you. I only want benefactress. Call me sister. Arbor irritably rapped his bald head, and carried him out the door. Where did this weird little monk come from? Duan Yu speechlessly watched the two's departing figures before glancing at Emolien. Hey, when are we returning? It's not like we're going the same way. How are we not going the same way? Duan Yu folded his arms and glanced at him with a gloating smile. Jojo said we're going together. Emolien, that she was irritated by this punk's smugness. After Arbor finished serving the little monk, he carried the child back. When he passed by the city gates, he happened to see Wenren Ningjing setting up a stall to treat patients. After treating a patient, Wenren Ningjing looked up and happened to see Arbor passing by. She looked away with a taut face, not very happy to greet this person. Hey! When Arbor walked up to Wenren Ningjing with the little baldy in hand, Kong Rumio immediately raised her chin like a rooster, vigilantly preparing for battle. What do you want now? We're treating these people right now, so we don't have time to deal with you. Kong Rumio said sternly. Here you go. The little stoic couldn't be bothered with Kong Rumio, and directly threw out a box of ointment in front of Wenren Ningjing. Once in the morning and once in the evening, the scar can be removed within a day. After speaking, without waiting for Wenren Ningjing to react, he picked up little Baldy and turned to leave. Kong Rumio was so angry that her face turned askew. She grabbed the ointment that was half the size of her palm and wanted to throw it away. Wait! Wenren Ningjing stopped her. She took the box of ointment, opened it and sniffed. Her face was full of astonishment. What's wrong? Kong Rumio asked curiously. High-grade wound medicine. It smells even purer than the medicine made by my master. Wenren Ningjing subconsciously raised her hand to touch the shallow mark on her chin. Impossible, Kong Rumio said angrily. Maybe she tampered with the medicine and wanted to disfigure you. Wenren Ningjing shook her head. She won't. How do you know? She's such a proud person and disdains to do this. Benefactress, giving medicine is a good thing in the first place. If you don't tell other people about your good intentions, how can they understand you? The little monk couldn't help asking. Why do I need other people to understand me? Sigh, I'm really worried about you. The little monk sighed heavily. Arbor couldn't help but find it funny and rubbed his bald head. Let's go home. Let's go home for the new year. Chapter 819. Ever since she went to the holy water sect to cultivate, she hadn't been able to celebrate the new year at home for 7 years. This year, she had promised her mother that she would stay at home no matter what. Hence, after the party cleaned up the mess in Bailon City, they hurried back to the Emo Kingdom capital. Fortunately, it was only a day's journey between the Emo Kingdom capital and Bailon. They set off early in the morning, and had already set foot in the Emo Kingdom capital by 10 in the evening. Zhao Ho had made preparations for the battle against the zombies in Bailon City this time. All of the participating soldiers had donned special armor that could effectively defend against the zombies' scratches. Thus, after this battle, only a dozen or so people were injured, which was an extremely good result. After compensating the families of the dead and injured soldiers, Zhao Ho and Hui Feng's troops hastily bid farewell to the Crown Prince as soon as they entered the Emo Kingdom capital. They each returned to report to the Great King and the Queen. Emo Lien, along with Duan Yu and Arbor, led a few people and leisurely paced their horses inside the city. Sixth Zheng, Wu Xiaoan, and the others urged their horses forward to bid them farewell. Emo Lien felt somewhat vexed looking at this sixth young master Zheng, especially when she saw him staring at her baby without blinking. She cupped her hands and whispered, "Many thanks to Miss for saving me this time. Farewell. If there is a chance in the future, I will definitely repay this favor." He looked at Sixth Zheng, feeling strangely vexed. Arbor nodded at Sixth Zheng and said, "Take care." Even Duan Yu could see something fishy about the little fellow's bizarre attitude. This was truly strange. According to Duan Yu's understanding of the little fellow, this little stoic basically ignored strangers. Who was this Sixth Zheng? How did he inexplicably catch the little fellow's eye? Could it be that their ancestral graves were emitting green smoke? Duan Yu glanced at Sixth Zheng's departing figure with envy and jealousy. He secretly shifted his gaze to Emolien's face and tried to communicate with him with his eyes. "Duan Yu, what's going on?" "Emolien, humph." She proudly turned her head away from him. Before this, when second young Master Do had brought the people of Celestial Medicine Valley to bid farewell, it was very clear that Miss Chiao hadn't even glanced at second young Master Do out of the corner of her eye. Did he not like second Do? Duan Yu winked at Emolien. Speaking of which, just how many stories had happened while he wasn't around? His heart itched. He really wanted to know. The Celestial Medicine Valley naturally had a branch in the Emo Kingdom capital. Before leaving, second young Master Do hesitantly glanced at Arbor, before leading the Celestial Medicine Valley group away. Second Do was also very suspicious in his heart. He always felt that the Crown Princess's eyes held hostility towards him. But why? Even junior sister Wenren, whom she had a small dispute with, was ignored by the Crown Princess. But why did she treat him like this? Jojo, how did the Do family's second son provoke you? Duan Yu asked curiously. He had heard a little about the Do clan's second son. He was brimming with talent and extraordinarily handsome. He had lived in the Celestial Medicine Valley for a long time, and his acupuncture skills were quite impressive. Why couldn't Jojo take a liking to such a modest and elegant young man? What a strange young lady. His surname is Do. This was the reason she looked down on him? Because his surname was Do. Wasn't this second young Master Do wronged? Duan Yu revealed a wide grin. That's right, it really isn't good to have the surname Do. Emolien glanced at him exasperatedly. Where was this person's integrity? It wasn't good to throw his integrity out to feed the dogs every day, right? Jojo, Sixth Zheng isn't actually a good person. Duan Yu continued to slander. Did you know? He's a member of the Zheng family. Chapter 820. Arbor was taken aback, and he turned to look at Duan Yu. Duan Yu quickly explained. It's that Zheng family, the Zheng family that you loathe. Consort Zheng's nephew Sixth Zheng. Speaking of which, we're enemies with him, so don't get too close to him. If you get involved with the Zheng family, it'll be very troublesome in the future. It turned out that little Sixth was actually from Consort Zheng's maternal family. This was something she didn't know in her previous life. Ever since little Sixth joined their team, he had never revealed his surname, and only referred to himself as little Sixth, so she was completely unaware. Speaking of which, there's something you definitely don't know. Duan Yu held the reins with one hand, and turned to look at the two of them. He said with a grin, that Consort Zheng. Didn't Consort Zheng's title of noble consort just get stripped away by Consort Zheng, and demoted to a normal consort before you left? What happened to her now? Emolien and Arbor asked in unison. Hehe. The night before I left the country kingdom capital to find you guys, she was personally released from Sephora Flower Palace by the Great King. Duan Yu looked at Emolien with a chuckle. I say, your dad is really amusing enough. He had just demoted him, and in less than half a month, he had promoted him back to his former position. He even wantonly rewarded the Zheng estate so much. I reckon that your mom must be quite furious right now. Emolien coldly glared at Duan Yu. Duan Yu rubbed his nose, and spread his hands in exasperation. I'm just stating the facts. Don't call her Consort Zheng anymore. She was promoted to noble consort by the Great King again. Oh, apparently Consort Zheng is pregnant again. So your dad was happy, and not only removed Consort Zheng's ban, he even promoted her again. Arbor was taken aback, and his lips curled into a sneer. She's pregnant? Duan Yu felt that there was something wrong with Darling Qiao's smile, but he didn't ask and nodded in high spirits. Darling, she came out to make you unhappy again. How do you think we should deal with her? Who's with you? You can't just call me Bao Bao. Emolien gave him a look that told him to get lost. She rode forward and took Arbor's reins. Jojo, don't think about these things. I'll take you home first. Right, let's go home first. We'll talk when we get home. Duan Yu also hurriedly chimed in. Arbor nodded. She was a little tired after being busy every day. She needed to rest for a few days when she got home. As for Consort Zheng, let's put it aside for now. In any case, the special beautifying pill that State Uncle Zheng had bought at a sky-high price had already been offered to her. After she took it for a while, she would be able to teach her a lesson. Arbor, Emolien, and Duan Yu turned onto Minshan Avenue. but they stopped after walking a few meters. They saw a carriage blocking the path at the corner. A miss inside the carriage had already been carried down, and two maidservants were frantically massaging her forehead as they called out repeatedly, "Miss Mississippi." Duan Yu raised his brows and gave Emolien a look that said, "Did you invite them here?" From across Arbor. Emolien rolled her eyes at him in annoyance. When he turned around, he saw an old doctor carrying a medicine box. He was being dragged by someone, and was out of breath as he ran over. Emolien and the others dismounted, and threw the reins to the retainers to handle. They weren't far from the Marquis' estate, and Arbor didn't have much of a noble style, so they just walked a few steps. That old physician crouched there, and administered 2 needles to the miss. Suddenly, the miss's limbs started convulsing, and her face contorted in extreme pain. Chapter 8:21. Why is it like this? The old physician muttered to himself as he continued to perform acupuncture on that miss with a forehead full of sweat. The 2 maidservants were so anxious that tears fell from their eyes. Arbor simply didn't want to join in the fun. In any case, the other party had already called for a physician, so naturally, the physician would handle the situation. Emolien pulled her by the hand as she walked past the miss on the ground. She suddenly paused and gazed at that Mrs. Glabella, as she softly exclaimed in surprise. Seeing that she had stopped, Emolien also stopped. Duan Yu glanced forward in amusement and asked quietly, "Xiao Qiao, what did you discover?" This wasn't some illness. There was actually a rune faintly discernible between that Mrs. Glabella. What was going on? Arbor immediately became vigilant. She tugged at Emolien's hand, and pushed Duan Yu back. Her chilly gaze then turned to that miss who couldn't get up from the ground. "Physician, can you treat my miss or not? Look at her pained expression." The maidservant couldn't resist criticizing that sweaty old physician. "This pulse is clearly normal. This old man has practiced medicine for many years, but I've never seen this kind of symptom." "What normal? My miss was fine in the carriage just now." But she suddenly clutched her chest and cried out in pain. Then she fainted. The maidservant shouted anxiously and angrily, "Physician, if you can't tell what's wrong, don't delay my miss's illness." The old physician was momentarily at a loss for words, and also stood up uneasily. "Come, let me take a look." Arbor suddenly took a step forward and squatted down in front of that miss. When the maidservant turned around and saw a young lady even younger than her miss, her eyes immediately brimmed with distrust. "Who are you? What do you want?" "Xiao Yi." "Yes, young master." Xiao Yi led 2 people forward, and lifted up those 2 shrieking maidservants without a second word. Each person slapped down, and the 2 maidservants' necks crooked, and they both fainted. What do you want to do?" "My family's young miss is the 3rd young miss of Li Shaoqing of the Guanglu Temple. You better not mess around." The carriage driver stared dumbfoundedly at Xiao Ye's group. When his gaze landed on Emolien and Duan Yu, he felt that these 2 youths were out of the ordinary. "Sorry to trouble you." Arbor held Miss Li's hand and felt her pulse. With a wave of his finger, he took out a blue talisman and slapped it on her chest. The rune flashed in front of Miss Li's chest and surged into Miss Li's body. It went straight to the center of her eyebrows and eliminated the black rune. Miss Li promptly groaned and opened her eyes, meeting Xiao Mu's gaze in bewilderment. "It's all right. Hurry up and bring your young lady back to the mansion." Arbor stood up and left, leaving behind the coachman, who kept thanking him with a grateful expression. After the 3 of them were some distance away from the carriage, Duan Yu couldn't resist asking curiously, "Jojo, did you use a talisman on her just now? Could it be that Miss Li isn't sick?" "She was hit by a forbidden curse." Arbor's small face was taut, and his expression was very solemn. That is a group of people born from talisman practitioners, who unscrupulously pursued dark forbidden curse talisman arts. Fortunately, this talisman practitioner's skills weren't up to par yet, so she only used the simplest kind of sickness talisman to break it. However, Arbor didn't expect that a talisman practitioner would appear in the Mo Kingdom capital. Chapter 8:22. As the name implied, a charm master was a type of person who wandered in the darkness and secretly used forbidden charms in order to achieve their own unspeakable goals. They were derived from talisman practitioners and had their own inheritances. After several hundred years, many unknown forbidden spells had actually long been lost. The most common illness talisman had different effects depending on the level of the talisman maker. The illness talisman on Miss Li was only a primary level 1, so it wasn't troublesome to resolve it. However, what made Emolien and the others feel strange was that curse practitioners, a group that had been extinct for more than 100 years, actually appeared again. Without any warning. Let the talisman patrician family investigate and resolve this matter themselves. Emolien said indifferently. The talisman patrician family wiped out a group of curse practitioners 300 years ago. They are the most unwilling to see the rise of curse practitioners. The Mu family absolutely won't allow the existence of curse practitioners to break the balance of the talisman world. Duan Yu also said with a smile. On the other hand, Arbor wasn't too worried. To put it bluntly, curse practitioners and whatnot didn't have much to do with her. As long as they didn't blindly come over to offend her, it had nothing to do with her no matter how they opposed the talisman patrician family. Go spread the news to the talisman patrician family. Emolien turned around and instructed Huifeng. The latter nodded and went to do his job without a word. When Arbor returned home, she was just in time for her family's meal, which made everyone overjoyed. Wei Ziqin had been nagging these past 2 days about why the child wasn't back yet. Qiao Zhongbang and second uncle Qiao hadn't dared to tell anyone that Arbor was in Bailon City, so the two of them had been on tenterhooks for several days. Now that they saw that the little fellow had returned unscathed, they were naturally very happy. Arbor took the little monk's hand and introduced him to her family, saying that he was a little monk she had casually picked up on the road. This little monk was as soft and cute as a white bun, so Wei Ziqin took a liking to him at first sight. On the other hand, our dear Qiao Xin became vigilant as he repeatedly glanced at the little monk. Seeing that she was a bit tired, everyone urged her to rest after eating. Arbor had suffered her first menstrual cycle these past few days, so she was a bit dispirited, so she washed up and went to bed. As for the little monk, she naturally left it to her mother to make arrangements. At night, in a dilapidated temple, the sound of an old lady coughing could be heard from time to time. On the icy ground, elderly lady was curled up in thin clothes. Even her only lined jacket had been sold by Su Jiao, so she could only silently endure the cold and weep. She had never thought that her days would end up like this. It was one thing for her to eat and drink less, but the main point was that she was already so old, yet she was often beaten and scolded by her evil daughter-in-law. Su Jiao's patience with the elderly lady ran out on the 3rd day, after she moved into the rundown temple. She waited and waited, but Qiao Zhongbang and his wife didn't come to pick her up, and Xiao Zhongheng couldn't find a job as a guard. She didn't know how the family had survived these past few days, but they were practically fighting over food with dogs. In addition, the old lady was used to living a luxurious life. Whenever she fell ill, she would ask her to take care of her. Her anger rose day by day, and she couldn't help but beat the old lady up. She became addicted to beating her, and would beat the old lady to death every few days when she was in a bad mood. Hearing the old lady's incessant coughing now, the anger in Su Jiao's heart surged again. After cursing, "Cursed old woman," Su Jiao jumped up, picked up a bamboo board she was used to, and swung it at the old lady. Chapter 823. Damn old hag, cough cough cough. What are you coughing for? Do you still have peaceful days to pass, huh? I'll beat you to death, you old fart. Ah, you're going to beat me to death, cough cough. I'm going to beat you to death, ah. Elderly lady thrashed on the ground like a dead fish. Oh my, are you not letting people sleep anymore? Granny Nyo sat up and grumbled. Qiao Zhongheng also cursed. Are you done yet? Are you going to buy her a coffin if you beat her to death? Su Jiao spat, and threw down the bamboo board with a slap. Beat her to death and end all troubles, so as to avoid seeing the world in that half-dead state. The other families in the corner didn't find it strange, and after mocking and ridiculing Su Jiao, they prepared to go back to sleep. Just then, The sound of horses neighing came from the rundown temple's entrance, and someone said, "Master, it's here." A row of torches burned in from the temple's entrance, and the leader was an elderly man in his 60s. When he saw the stammering old woman half lying on the ground, he was slightly taken aback. Someone beside him whispered something into the elderly man's ear, and the elderly man immediately understood. He promptly put on a benevolent face and walked up to help up the thin and frail elderly lady, who was so dirty that her color couldn't be discerned. "Sister-in-law, I'm your brother from the same family, Xiao Dongbois. Do you still recognize me? We should have met a few times several years ago." Elderly Lady Qiao's mouth was cracked from the beating, but when she wanted to speak, it caused her mouth to tremble in pain. She pitifully looked at Xiao Dongbo with panda eyes. "Why you are?" Yet Xiao Zhongheng and Su Jiao understood first, and they immediately revealed covetous gazes. They walked up with bowed heads and bent waists, exchanging pleasantries with Xiao Dongbo. "Why you're the same family's eldest uncle, right? Oh my, we've finally met our relatives." Xiao Dongbo suppressed the disgust in his eyes and looked at them with a chuckle. Yes, you're Zhongheng, right? I'm your same family's eldest uncle." Xiao Dongbo actually had people investigate their identities long ago. If it weren't for the benefits, he wouldn't have thought of coming to the rundown temple to meet these country bumpkins. This unbearable old woman in front of him was the Marquis of Jiyuan's mother, the crown princess's grandmother. Xiao Dongbo's eyes flashed. Once Granny Niu saw Xiao Dongbo's decent attire, she was so anxious that she drooled. She went up to pull Su Jiao back and secretly poked her in a low voice. "Jiao, we've been through thick and thin together for these 10 days. If it weren't for me constantly helping you out, you wouldn't be able to look forward to good days now. I don't care. You have to take my family with you, ah." Su Jiao pursed her lips noncommittally. Granny Niu became anxious upon seeing this, and she went up to pinch her hand as she whispered, "If you return to the main family, you'll have one more brother and one more helper. My son and 2 grandsons are all capable of helping you." Right. Madame Bo also hurriedly stepped forward and said to Su Jiao with a fawning expression, "Younger sister Jiao, our 2 families have been together for so long, so we know each other very well. Take us with you. It'll be easier for you in the future." The other people in the dilapidated temple also looked at them enviously. They secretly regretted not building a good relationship with Qiao Zhongheng's family from the start. Su Jiao straightened her back like a proud peacock, looking down on these lowly commoners in the corner of the rundown temple. Humph! When she returned to the Qiao family's main family and became the 3rd young mistress, she definitely wouldn't let off Qiao Zhongbang and his family of devils. Achoo! Arbor reached out to rub his small nose. Chapter 824. Xiao Yao, who had brought the water in, hurried over. "Miss, did you catch a cold?" "I'm fine." Arbor drank a bowl of hot porridge after washing up. After eating, she lazily returned to bed. Xiao Yao couldn't help but laugh. "Master and Madam came to see you this morning, but left when they saw that you were asleep. Madam said to go to the courtyard for dinner tonight." Arbor nodded. It was already past lunchtime. She wasn't too hungry after eating a bowl of porridge, so she sent Xiao Yao out. After her afternoon nap, she had a bowl of sweet soup. The little fellow was still lazily reading in bed when she looked up to see Xiao Yao walk in with a strange expression, holding several invitations. "What is it?" The matriarchs of the Qin family, Mu family, and several other noble families, as well as the prince's consorts, have all sent you invitations, inviting you to admire the plum blossoms, the bamboo, and the scenery. Oh, the little fellow's fingertips fluttered as she flipped a page of the book. "Just one-o." Xiao Yao's mouth twitched. "Cough, this servant acted on my own initiative and rejected them all for you. However, the great king's 2nd consort said that she would personally visit you a few days ago. I reckon that she will insist on inviting you to the plum blossoms banquet. I don't have time." The little fellow didn't even bother to lift her head. "Miss, what are you busy with these 2 days?" Xiao Yao asked honestly. "Do you need the servant to help you?" "There's nothing to be busy with. I'll just sleep and read some books. I'm too lazy to go out." Arbor put down the book in her hand and looked at the sunlight outside the window. Her bright eyes narrowed, and she flipped out of bed in an extremely good mood. Let's go and stroll around our family's garden. Xiao Yao smiled and followed the little fellow out the door. Along the way, she said, Miss, will you be entering the palace on New Year's Eve? According to tradition, Her Majesty the Queen will gather the princesses and princesses, as well as all the noble ladies to the palace to make dumplings. Of course, the missus didn't actually need to do anything. It was just a formality. I'm not going. Darling Qiao rejected without a second thought. I'm not going anywhere for New Year's this year. I'll stay at home and accompany my mother. Xiao Yao sighed and said with a smile, Madam will be overjoyed. Yes, give everyone more food on New Year's Eve. Give out more delicious food. Okay. Xiao Yao replied happily. On New Year's Eve, madams and young misses gathered in the Queen's brilliant Sun Palace Hall. Queen Zhao, whose melancholy had been washed away by the joyous atmosphere of the new year, sat at the head of the table in high spirits, smiling as she looked at the group of noble women. Although it was supposed to be making dumplings, it was just as Xiaorao had said. It was just a formality, and there was no need for the young misses and madams to do anything. Only the servant girls would take some ready-made dumpling wrappers and fillings from the kitchen and fiddle with them. Consort Zheng is here. Following the announcement, everyone stopped what they were doing and stood up to salute her. Consort Zheng, with the support of her personal maid Kailing, slowly walked in wearing a spacious satin robe and a graceful and luxurious appearance. Greetings to Consort Zheng. Everyone saluted in unison. Consort Zheng stroked her temples and said with a smile, You may all rise. Then, supported by Kailing, she walked in front of the queen and slightly curtsied. Consort Zheng smiled and said, This concubine greets your majesty the queen. This concubine's body has been a bit heavy these past 2 days, so I woke up late. Please forgive me, elder sister. The queen coldly glanced at her, her gaze seemingly sweeping over her flat stomach. Then she sneered, Younger sister's body is heavy, so there's no need to be so courteous. Sit. Thank you, your majesty. Consort Zheng seductively sat down and swept her gaze over everyone. She pretended to be surprised and said, why don't I see the crown princess? Chapter 825. Queen Zhao was infuriated. This was simply rubbing salt into the wound. A while ago, her son had come to tell her about this matter. This stoic face would not enter the palace on New Year's Eve. She would only enter the palace on the first day of the first lunar month, to pay a New Year's visit to the great king and queen, as well as attend the New Year's banquet. According to the usual practice of previous years, the princesses, commandery princesses, noble ladies, and noble ladies would all enter the palace to go through the motions. However, her daughter-in-law said that she would not be coming, so she, as her mother-in-law, couldn't take it lying down. This morning, Huaxian had properly comforted her, which made her feel a bit better. Consort Zheng, this bitch, jabbed Her Majesty the Queen's heart with one sentence. Consort Zheng chuckled while covering her mouth. This consort heard that the great king's second consort held a plum banquet and personally sent an invitation to the crown princess, but she was turned away at the door. Everyone's gazes then shifted to the great king's second consort, Xu Quan, who was sitting in the first seat in the second row on the left. Xu Quan stood up gracefully and curtsied to the queen before curtsying to the noble consort. Afterwards, she spoke unhurriedly like a young lady from a noble family. It was Quaner who was impetuous. She was not turned away at the door, and the Marchioness of Jiyuan personally welcomed her. She said that the crown princess has been feeling unwell ever since she returned to the capital. Queen Zhao's expression eased slightly, and she said with a nod, This consort also heard about it. I have yet to congratulate Consort Zheng for choosing another daughter-in-law. A middle-aged consort seated below Consort Zheng commented with a smile, It is all thanks to your majesty's great fortune. She plans to welcome Li Xiu east into the estate after the New Year's Eve. Queen Zhao's expression was inexplicable. Consort Cheng Zemo Jiao had married beautiful wives and concubines one after another. On the other hand, why did her outstanding son seem to have been bewitched by the little stoic? There was no one else in his eyes besides that stoic face. The Queen Dowager probably won't be coming back for the New Year's Eve this time. Commandery Princess Ian is accompanying her, and she is still recuperating at Ziyu Villa. Queen Zhao explained with a smile. Tomorrow's New Year's banquet will be held in this Queen's brilliant Sun Hall. Early the next morning, the great king would gather all the civil and military officials for a grand ceremony. After the ceremony, it would be the New Year's banquet, and another round of rewards. Consort Jung couldn't help but snort when she saw that the queen had changed the topic and stopped talking about that unruly crown princess. She thought to herself, I don't believe that you, Madame Zhao, really like that stoic-faced daughter-in-law that much. Queen Zhao's momentary change in expression was already a clear indication of the problem. Since Zhao sure held a grudge against the little stoic, she naturally had to make good use of her. Consort Jung curled her lips. When she recalled the humiliation she suffered at the hands of the stoic face, she was filled with indignation and couldn't eat or sleep in peace. The noble madams and young misses below had already started fervently discussing what clothes they should wear and what rouge and face powder they should apply for tomorrow's New Year's banquet. Queen Zhao only felt that although she was sitting in the main hall, she felt unusually lonely in her heart. Her eyes were fixed on the crowd, and she felt that the chatter of those madams and young misses seemed to be separated by a layer of gauze, sounding hazy and indistinct. Meanwhile, the entire Qiao family was in jubilation at this time. Everyone of all ages was crowded inside the spacious drawing room. The adults were busy making dumplings, while the children were playing with flower balls in their hands. The Qiao family had given all the servants a day off, and told them to go home for a reunion. They could only return at noon tomorrow. The remaining servants who were all alone were called over to help out. Chang Zai, Old Bai, Sun Yang, and the other old loyal servants of the Qiao family were already familiar with their master's New Year's celebration. Chapter 826. Several of the new servants were all shocked. Master had just said that there weren't any masters or servants today. Everyone here was a family, and they were all working together to make a reunion meal. Dongmei didn't know how many years it had been since she had eaten a full meal. She was an orphan, and had experienced the fickleness of human nature since she was young. She had struggled her way through life, until she was sent here by a broker not long ago, and was luckily chosen by elder sister Chunying. Ever since she started working in the Qiao estate, she no longer had to worry about starving or freezing. A few days ago, she received 2 sets of new winter clothes and new jackets. At that time her tears fell. She secretly told herself that she had to work hard. It was rare to meet such a good master. If she didn't work hard, she would really be a fool. Today was New Year's Eve, and Master and Madam actually allowed all the servants who didn't go home to have a reunion meal together. This once again refreshed her understanding of the master's family. Stop playing. Wei Ziqin lightly patted her younger daughter's hand and said with a smile, Look at your sister. What kind of toy are you making? Xiao Lin pouted and said, Mother, you only care about sister. Look at sister's dumplings. They're so crooked and ugly. How can they be prettier than mine? It was rare for Arbor to feel awkward. Don't tell me that her talent in cooking was very mediocre. You lass. Wei Ziqin raised her hand to pat her younger daughter. But Xiao Lin ran away in a flash, and sprinkled a handful of flour on her younger brother Xiao Sin's little face. Xiao Sun looked at his sister with a dumbfounded expression. The white dumpling-like little monk beside him actually chuckled, and clapped his hands together. Just as he was about to open his mouth and chant my Buddha, he freaking flicked the flour all over his face. His nose and little mouth were stained with some white. Xiao Lin looked back and laughed out loud. His Highness the Crown Prince is here. His Highness the Crown Prince is here. Changzai excitedly ran through the door and shouted. The whole family hastily patted off the flour on their bodies and hands. Just as they were about to turn around to welcome them, Emol Yin strode inside with a bright smile. Dad, Mom, Qiao Qiao, I've come. Wei Ziqin laughed so hard that her eyes couldn't be seen. Duan Yu, who was following behind her, involuntarily harumphed and pursed his lips. He eagerly ran up to her and said, Auntie, I'm also here. I especially came today to freeload. Hey kid, what are you talking about? If you like, you can come here to eat every day. Wei Ziqing couldn't stop smiling. When Emolien heard this, she immediately ran to her mother-in-law's side and said, Mother, we have to make him hand over his rice, oil and salt. Shoo shoo shoo. Auntie isn't as petty as you, Duan Yu said with a grin. Arbor smirked and walked over to Emolien with a plump dumpling that he had made. He stuffed it into his hands and said, I made it. Jojo, the dumplings you make are really pretty. I can eat 30 of them in one go if you make them. Can't you eat until you're full? Duan Yu speechlessly rolled his eyes before also saying, I can also eat 30 of them. Xiao Zhongbang laughed heartily. Okay, then let's hurry up and make more dumplings. Aren't you returning to the palace today? Arbor quietly asked as he tugged at Emolien's sleeve. Emolien's phoenix eyes curved as he smiled at him. I'll stay up with you until the new year. We can just return before 5 o'clock. At 5 o'clock, the great king would solemnly hold a grand opening ceremony. At that time, all civil and military officials would have to attend and present memorials to express their respect, singing the praises of the great king as a formality. Chapter 827. With the addition of Emolien and Duan Yu, the house became much livelier. After finishing the dumplings noisily, Arbor took out a sumptuous meal from the food box. 2 tables were set up in the living room, and the whole family joyfully ate a reunion dinner, without distinction between master and servant. Wei Ziqing took out small embroidered pouches and distributed them to the servants who were beaming with joy. She also gave the children all kinds of gold ingots with flower marks on them. The ingots for the children were for fun, while the ingots for the servants were 10 pieces of low-grade mystic currency that could be used to purchase items. This type of mystic currency was the newest circulating currency that the imperial court had just issued. It was forged from magnetite, so it was naturally divided into low-grade, mid-grade, high-grade and supreme-grade mystic currency. Reportedly, it was not only used in the Emo Kingdom, but also in many northern countries. Every fortification of various sizes could use this type of mystic currency to register in advance, so that they could purchase items from the food and cloth stores the next day. Dong Mei tightly clutched the embroidered pouch in her hand. She only felt that the main family was all good people, and that she had a lot to look forward to these days. Arbor sat on the eaves, holding a cup of hot tea in one hand, as she looked up at the bright moon in the distance. In the past, at this time, she would accompany the old sect master and aunt masters on the snowy peaks to admire bamboo and drink tea, quietly waiting for the new year to come. Perhaps he would never return to such a life again. Jojo, are you thinking of the sect? Emolien's large, warm hand gently grasped her soft, small hand. When Arbor looked up, she saw the man's phoenix eyes rippling under the moonlight. As long as Jojo is here, the sect won't disappear. Emolien reached out to pinch her small chin before pointing downwards. Look, father and mother are so happy today. Arbor looked down and saw the 2 foodies, Xiao Lin and Xiao Sun, hugging a large fruit box and happily munching on multicolored fruits. Xiao, who was collapsed on the side, perhaps because he ate too much, he was rubbing his stomach with one hand. Xiaoyao stifled her laughter as she brought him a bowl of digestive soup. Brother Xiao, who scrambled to his feet and smiled foolishly at Xiaoyao with an embarrassed expression. Duan Yu was currently playing horse diao with his parents and second uncle. When she looked over, she happened to see her mother grinning from ear to ear. Oh my Duan Yu, are you always going easy on Auntie? Auntie got burned again. Auntie, you're so lucky today. Xiao Zhongbang pretended to be angry and snorted. Why not? With Buddha's blessings, how could he be unlucky? She saw the little monk sitting cross-legged on a soft cushion next to her mother's feet. He was holding a wooden fish in his hand and knocking it while mumbling something. The corner of second Uncle Qiao's mouth twitched. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he said, Little master, can you stop knocking? Which monastery would hold morning prayers until this hour? What a funny little doll. She didn't work hard in the morning, but when night came, she was cramming. That's not it. The little monk answered second Uncle Qiao's question as he knocked on the wooden fish. This young monk is doing tomorrow's morning prayer. Second Uncle Qiao glanced at him exasperatedly. Why are you doing tomorrow's morning prayer now? Duan Yu guffawed. Is there a need to ask? It's definitely because he can't get up tomorrow morning. The little monk lowered his head with a blush and continued to knock on the wooden fish, casting everyone's laughter to the back of his mind. It wasn't until Arbor was feeling a bit sleepy that the sound of firecrackers and drums rang out, waking her up with a start. When she looked again, she saw that her drowsy state from earlier had thrown herself into Emolien's arms. Chapter 828. The little monk had already finished tomorrow's morning lesson and was having fun with Qiao Senator. He ran over to tug at Duan Yu's robes and insisted on dragging him to set off the firecrackers. Duan Yu couldn't win against the children and was dragged out the door. Emolien floated down from the eaves with Arbor in her arms and followed them out. In the darkness of the night, the light from the firecracker suddenly shot out, breaking the silence of the area with a bang. Arbor was a bit sleepy and fell asleep in a daze. She didn't even know when Emolien carried her back to her room. She didn't sleep well the entire night because of the firecrackers. However, all the madams and noble ladies had to enter the palace to pay Her Majesty the Queen their New Year greetings before 7 a.m. today. She didn't go to the palace yesterday, so she naturally couldn't challenge Queen Zhao's dignity today. After freshening up, Arbor changed into a bright red dress and a cloak made of firefox fur of the same color. At this time, the sky was just beginning to brighten. Xiao Yao was at the front holding a lantern to illuminate the way. Arbor walked to her mother's courtyard and happened to encounter Xiao Lin when she reached the front of the main room. Sister, Happy New Year. Give me my New Year's money. Xiao Lin was wearing a pink jacket with a sapphire blue fur cloak wrapped around it. When she saw her, she quickly ran up with a grin and hugged her arm. You're asking for a beating, asking sister for things all day long. Wei Ziqin happened to walk out and chided with a smile when she saw Arbor stuffing a pouch to her youngest daughter. Xiao Lin stuck out her tongue and shrunk her neck to hide behind Arbor. She waved the pouch in her hand and shook it. Sister gave it to me. I'll have brother-in-law give me another one later. Make a pair, hee. Xiao Lin stuck out her tongue. Wei Ziqin looked at her daughter with a headache and raised her hand to smack her again. Look at her mischievous appearance. You're not allowed to cause trouble for your sister when you enter the palace today. Mother, what trouble can I cause? Xiao Lin shook her head and said, I don't know how obedient I am. As they were talking, Qiao Zhongbang walked out with his youngest son. Qiao Senator, he smiled and said, Are the three of you ready? It's time to go. It's been done for a long time. Father, we were waiting for you, Jolin said. Then let's go. Xiao Zhongbang had just finished speaking when a small bald head popped out from the side of the door. The little monk looked at Arbor pitifully. Benefactress, where are you going? Arbor glanced at him and waved at him. I'll take you to eat meat. The small monk immediately shook his head like a rattledrum. I'm not eating. This little monk is determined not to eat meat. Wei Ziqin secretly pulled Arbor's sleeve and whispered, Jojo, are you going to bring Kong Kong into the palace? Yes. Arbor nodded and said, Today's New Year's banquet is divided into 2 parts, and I won't be back until very late. It would be too pitiful to leave the little monk alone at home. Wei Ziqin thought about it and agreed. She also couldn't bear to leave the child alone at home, but she was still a little worried. Will Nyang Nyang not like it? Arbor said coldly. What does it have to do with me whether she likes it or not? Wei Ziqin was speechless. This daughter of hers was always so cold. People who didn't know her would definitely think that she wasn't easy to get close to. The family boarded the Marquis's carriage and headed towards Huabei Gate. Today's New Year's banquet invited officials of 5th rank and above, and their family members. It wasn't early for them to leave, and the roads would probably be a little congested. Chapter 829. Sure enough, before they even entered Huabei Gate, the official road started to get a little congested. The carriages were connected to one another, and they couldn't see the end of the road. The driver was a young man called Hazy. He was in his early 20s and worked for his father. He spoke and acted very nimbly. He Zi's driving skills were pretty good, and the carriage moved steadily. Along the way, the whole family was laughing and chatting. From time to time, he would carry the little monk over to tease him. The little monk put his palms together and kept muttering to himself. "Kong Kong, how many years have you been a monk?" Xiao Lin deliberately teased the little monk and scratched his little head. The little monk looked at her with some confusion. He blinked his eyes and counted with his fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4. Kong Kong has been in the temple for 4 years. Benefactress's sister, why are you asking this? When Arbor heard this title, the corner of her mouth couldn't help but twitch. Her father, Qiao Zhongbang, also twitched. Ever since this child came to their house, the titles he used were especially strange. Benefactress's father, Benefactress's mother. Arbor reached out and pulled the little monk in front of her. "Call me big sister. Do you still want to eat meat?" Not eating, not eating, not eating. Vegetables. The little monk hesitated for a moment. "It's okay to eat less." Arbor moved her finger and took out a juicy peach from her inner world. "Call me big sister. Big sister." The little monk immediately reached out and took the peach. Xiao Lin laughed loudly. "Master, madam, young master, young miss, sit tight." He Zi's anxious voice came from outside. With a bang, the carriage shook violently. Fortunately, the carriage was sturdy enough and didn't fall apart after being hit. "Peach," the little monk exclaimed and almost threw the peach in his hand out. "What's going on?" Arbor asked coldly. He Zi's anxious voice came. "How are you driving? Why did you hit someone's carriage?" "Apa!" A whip lashed out. Arbor suddenly lifted the curtain. He Zi half bent his waist and straightened his back. He hurriedly replied, "Miss He Zi is fine. Who dares to block our Duke of Qing's estate? Get out of the way. Our master said that if you don't know etiquette and don't give way, we won't care if you're beaten to death or injured." The crafty servant driving the carriage didn't wait for He Zi to speak. Blackie's face was full of anger, and he said indignantly, "It was clearly you who came from behind to take the path, yet you still dare to speak like this. You're being unreasonable." Moreover, they had not reached Huabei Gate yet. This section of the road was still quite wide. "If you wanted to overtake me, you could have done it. Why did you have to crash into me? No one would believe you if you said you did not do it on purpose." He Zi, Xiaomu coldly gazed at that wicked servant. "Blackie is here. Knock him back. They didn't care if they were killed or injured. All you need to do is ram. If anything happens, I'll take responsibility for it." Since Arbor had spoken, Blackie naturally obeyed. He whipped the horse, and the carriage crashed into Duke Qing's mansion's carriage. Bang! Duke Qing's mansion's horse neighed and raised its hooves slightly. "Continue." Arbor had already set up a defensive barrier with one hand, enveloping the entire family and shielding them from all the vibrations. Blackie also got excited. When he heard Mrs. Words, he immediately continued to control the carriage and crashed into Duke Qing's mansion's carriage 3 times in a row. Blackie's driving skills were much better than the crafty servant's. The crafty servant didn't have enough strength, so he didn't control the carriage properly and was ruthlessly hit by Blackie's carriage. Chapter 830. One had to know that ever since the horse carriage incident, second Uncle Qiao paid special attention to safety when building horse carriages for the family. The materials used in the horse carriages were all of the best quality. How could the Duke of Qing Estate's horse carriage beat the Qiao Estate's? Suddenly, the carriage flipped over, and the Duke of Qing Estate's horse carriage fell to the ground with a bang. A figure rushed out of the horse carriage at an extremely fast speed. The items in the carriage all jolted out, and the scalding hot tea spilled all over the ground. Audacious dog slave. A stern shout rang out, followed by a powerful sword aura that struck towards He Zi with the force of a thunderbolt. If this strike hit, He Zi would definitely lose his life on the spot. Arbor raised her hand and sent out a wave of profound energy, directly repelling the opponent's sword aura. How could the opponent dare to receive it? He only felt a mighty wave of profound energy rushing towards him, as if it would tear him apart in the next second. At the critical moment, An old man suddenly appeared and sent out a wave of profound energy to meet it. The two waves of profound energy collided in midair, causing a loud bang. The passing horse carriages stopped in fright, and no one dared to move forward. The old man's right hand was slightly numb from the shock of the profound energy, and shock appeared in his eyes. Looking up, he saw the other party's horse carriage stop, and a red-clothed girl came down from it. Her clear gaze fell on them, and her face was expressionless. She was so young, but her profound energy cultivation was actually above his? The old man's eyes emitted a bit of disbelief. Damn it, the man who attacked earlier was in his early 20s. His face was very pale, as if he was anemic, and traces of gloominess floated in his eyes. At this moment, his black cloak had already been torn to shreds by the profound energy, revealing a gray robe inside. His entire person was somewhat in a sorry state. Bastard, you dared to do this to this young master. Slap. A heavy slap landed on his face from a distance. This slap contained profound energy, and half of Shi Guangjin's face was swollen in an instant. Ow! Shi Guangjin was caught off guard, and was a bit stunned. That old man hurriedly rushed over, and pulled him behind him. Third young master. Shi Guangjin's face suddenly became very ugly. His malicious eyes locked onto Arbor, as if he wanted to eat her alive. Crown Princess. Lightning floated behind her and whispered, "This man is Duke Qing's third son, Shi Guangjin." "I've dealt with it," Arbor said coldly. Without even glancing at Shi Guangjin from the corner of his eye, he turned around and boarded the car. Without any hesitation, Lightning reached out to grab Shi Guangjin's neck, provoking their vicious crown princess on the first day of the new year, especially trying to knock over the marquis's carriage, directly touching the crown princess reverse scale. This was really like carrying a lantern and courting death. "Hero, please show mercy." How could Lightning listen to his nagging? With a whistle, two more shadow guards appeared beside him and blocked the old man's xianqi with one hand. The cold sword was unsheathed, and the sword in Lightning's hand actually pierced towards Shi Guangjin's chest. "Who dares to cause trouble outside Huabei Gate? Violence is not allowed in front of Huabei Gate." Imperial Guard Commander Hui Feng, who had received news that someone was fighting outside Huabei Gate, hurriedly led a team over. From afar, he saw the sword in Lightning's hand piercing towards someone's chest. Hui Feng's brain spasmed, and he acted to stop him without thinking. "Commander Hui, you came at the right time. Quickly save me." Shi Guangjin breathed a sigh of relief and hid behind Hui Feng, as if he had caught a life-saving straw. Chapter 831. Shi Guangjin didn't expect that this young lady from the Qiao estate was completely different from any girl he had known before. She was someone who would make a move on you if she said so. She was ruthless and merciless. How could he, an elder who be a match for 4 or 5 people? Seeing that he was in trouble, Commander Hui arrived. Shi Guangjin immediately shrank behind Hui Feng, as if he had found a life-saving straw. Hui Feng still hadn't figured out the situation. He couldn't help but be stunned when he saw the cowardly appearance of the third young master of Duke Qing's estate. "Get out of my way." A cold voice rolled into Hui Feng's ears like a clap of thunder. He was startled. Who was this voice? When he turned his head to look, his jaw almost dropped in shock. "This general greets the crown princess." Hui Feng hurriedly restrained his shock and stepped forward. He lowered his head and cupped his fists in greeting. Arbor coldly glanced at him. "This person offended me in front of the palace gate. Should he be punished?" Hui Feng swallowed his saliva. He felt that the situation wasn't good. Looking at the crown princess's cold and emotionless expression, she couldn't be thinking of. How did third young master sure offend the crown princess? Hui Feng only felt that cold sweat was about to drip down. He cursed Shi Guangjin's 18 generations of ancestors in his heart. This bastard, of all people to provoke, he just had to blindly anger the crown princess. Was this person someone who could easily let go of you? He intended to overturn my carriage and murder me. Murder? This was a serious crime. Hui Feng hurriedly turned his head and glared at Shi Guangjin. "How dare you, Shi Guangjin?" Shi Guangjin saw that the situation wasn't good and immediately cried out. "There are so many carriages coming and going on this official road. Anyone can see it. My carriage was overturned by her. How can you say that I wanted to? Slap. Arbor waved her sleeve and slapped Shi Guangjin's other cheek across the air. Now it was completely symmetrical. Both sides of Shi Guangjin's face were puffed up like fermented buns, except that it was a little red. Did I allow you to interrupt? Arbor said coldly. Hui Feng's eyelids twitched, and he raised his sleeve to wipe his sweat. In the past, he had always heard He Tian and the others nag in front of him, saying that their future crown princess was not someone to be trifled with, and that they could mess with anyone but the crown princess. Previously, when he saw the crown princess in Bailon City, Hui Feng still didn't have a concrete idea of who she was. He only knew that the crown princess was a rather aloof person who was expressionless no matter who she met. Now that he had seen how she dealt with Shi Guangjin, Hui Feng finally had a preliminary understanding of the crown princess. It's a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding. Seeing that the situation was getting out of hand, the old man hurriedly stepped forward to smooth things over. Previously, when Shi Guangjin ordered the boy servant to crash into the Qiao family's carriage, he had advised against it. Unfortunately, Shi Guangjin didn't listen, which led to the current situation. At this time, their state Duke of Qing's estate's carriage had collapsed, and the crown princess's carriage had stopped, blocking the entire road. The carriages coming from behind had no choice but to stop. Several upper-class madams, young misses, and young masters dismounted and got off their horses, watching the commotion from afar. The state Duke of Qing's estate had lost face this time. Where are the crown princess's royal guards? Arbor shouted coldly. Here. Lightning and the others gathered behind her with a whoosh, each of them standing ramrod straight, their backs straight like pine trees. Chapter 832. Strip this person's clothes for me. With Arbor's command, Lightning and the others swiftly pounced forward. Shi Guangjin was enraged. Just as he was about to resist with mystic energy, Lightning suddenly struck the back of his neck with the hilt of her sword, causing him to fall flat on his face. Ow! Shi Guangjin howled in rage. The madams and young misses in the distance also used their handkerchiefs to cover their mouths, their eyes revealing disbelief. Heavens! Did the crown princess order them to do that? The other party was the Duke of Qing Estate's third young master. Wasn't the crown princess being too unreasonable by doing this? After all, she hadn't married the crown prince yet, and was only the crown princess in name. Wasn't she afraid of losing the Wang family's dignity by doing this? When the great king and queen blamed her, they would directly revoke her title of crown princess. Prince Consort. The maidservant Shi supported one of the great king's second consort Shu Quan's arms and whispered in her ear. That's the crown princess? She's really impressive, not even putting the Duke of Qing estate in her eyes. No wonder she said she wasn't feeling well that day, and dismissed the prince consort just like that. Shu Quan indifferently glanced at that young maidservant. Don't speak nonsense. Especially after entering the palace, you have to know propriety and etiquette. If your words were to fall into that person's ears, do you know what kind of punishment you'll receive? She jumped in fright and hurriedly wanted to kneel, but Shu Quan pulled her back. All right, I just want to remind you that you should speak according to your status. As she spoke, she sneered, her eyes filled with ice dregs and fragments. Otherwise, you won't have a good ending just like that foolish third son of the Duke of Qing estate in front of you. Shi's entire body trembled. When she looked over, she saw the Duke of Qing estate's third young master, kneeling in front of the crown princess, after his arms were pressed down, and his legs were kicked. Shi Guangjin's face was filled with shame and humiliation, and he angrily shouted, Slut, you haven't married His Highness the Crown Prince yet. Yet you're putting on airs in front of others. Who are you to deal with me now? I'm the third young master of the state Duke of Qing's estate. Do you dare to touch me? Shut up. Hui Feng slapped Shi Guangjin's face. Previously, he didn't know that Shi Guangjin actually insulted the crown prince consort like this. As expected, he was truly the most good-for-nothing in the state Duke of Qing's estate. This unscrupulous dog actually dared to wantonly insult the crown princess in front of Huabei Gate. If these words fell into the crown prince's ears, he would lose his life on the spot. Commander Hui, I've always respected you for being in charge of the safety of the Forbidden Palace. But now he was willing to be a lackey. Are you going to allow this woman to bully the people of the State Duke of Qing's mansion like this? Hui Feng was so angry that he was amused. Does the third son of Duke of Qing's estate know what he's saying? Such a brainless thing. If it weren't for his father, big brother and second brother, he would have been killed a few years ago. What are you doing? Don't touch me. Audacious dog slaves. Shi Guangjin struggled with all his might as he was pressed down on the ground. His eyes were incomparably red, as if they were injected with blood. Lightning, and the others didn't pay attention to his incessant barking. They directly tore off his clothes and pressed down on his arms, forcing him to kneel in front of Arbor with his head lowered. No matter how he struggled, he couldn't move his body. Jojo, Xiao Zhongbang and Wei Ziqin poked their heads out of the carriage with slightly anxious expressions. Chapter 833. Earlier, Jojo had them all stay in the carriage, and not a single one of them should come down. At this moment, Wei Ziqin was very anxious as she watched. If Jojo beat up that State Duke Qing estate's third son here, would there be any adverse effects? She was very worried. Arbor turned his head and gave his parents a don't worry look before turning back again and coldly glaring at Shi Guangjin. According to the rules, what punishment should be meted out for uttering wild words and offending the crown princess? Hui Feng's forehead was drenched in cold sweat. Shi Guangjin naturally wouldn't answer the crown princess, so he said, meted out a punishment of less than 60 beatings by flogging. Such a light punishment? Wouldn't flogging a mystic cultivator 60 beatings be like tickling an itch? No wonder everyone likes to diss me. It turns out that the punishment is so light? Arbor was enraged and coldly looked at Hui Feng. Think carefully again. What exactly is the punishment? Hui Feng's forehead was drenched in cold sweat. As a grown man, he was actually a bit unsteady under the little girl's piercing gaze. He stammered. Why yes, meted out 100 beatings by the military rod. Not enough. Arbor immediately vetoed. Think carefully again. If you flogged him again, he would die. While Hui Feng cursed 18 generations of Shi Guangjin's ancestors in his heart, he kept praying to the heavens. Your Highness, come quickly. This subordinate can't hold on much longer. Speak. Arbor shouted coldly. Hui Feng hastily said, 200 beatings by the military rod. Arbor's eyes were cold as he aloofly swept a glance at Hui Feng. Then what are you guys still standing there for? Flog him. Flog him now. Bring a stool over for me to sit on. I want to personally count for him. Everyone. Hui Feng secretly peeked at Shi Guangjin. This damn grandson. You provoked him yourself. Someone come, fetch the military rod. Immediately, 2 soldiers came forward, dragging their batons. They stood on either side of Shi Guangjin, one on his left and one on his right. Arbor sat down on an armchair carved from pear blossom wood. She raised her hand, and Xiao Yao immediately understood, and ran down from the carriage to hand her a cup of hot tea. Hui Feng's eyes twitched. Arbor took a sip of tea, looked at the 2 soldiers leisurely, and said indifferently, I heard that the military rod in your barracks is also a subject of study. For example, there's a method called drag beat. When you hit someone, you drag it out a little. Every time you hit someone, your skin will break and blood will flow. Laymen don't know the ropes, and will think that you hit someone very hard. In fact, you don't use any strength at all. As the crown princess spoke coldly, Hui Feng and the soldiers around him broke out in cold sweat. If you want to use this method to fool me, then don't. You can give it a try. The moment Arbor finished speaking, Hui Feng and the others simultaneously knelt on one knee and said in unison, This subordinate doesn't dare. If you don't dare, then hit him, Arbor said coldly. If eating alone doesn't increase your strength, I don't mind finding another 2 people to hit him. Yes, the 2 soldiers who were flogging him instantly straightened their backs, not daring to have any other thoughts. They got someone to press Shi Guangjin down, and swung the military rod at Shi Guangjin's buttocks on the spot. Shi Guangjin was publicly flogged outside Huabei Gate. He instantly lost all face, and his entire body trembled in anger. In the beginning, he didn't take the military rod seriously. After all, he was a mystic cultivator. He just couldn't bring himself to do it, and only felt humiliated. But gradually, that wasn't the case anymore. He couldn't keep using mystic energy to protect his buttocks, right? / Chapter 834. Mystic energy could also be exhausted, okay? Moreover, there was also a saying about being beaten with a military rod. The rod would always hit the same spot, and as time passed, even a man made of iron wouldn't be able to endure it. After using mystic energy to block 100 or so strikes for him, the remaining 70 to 80 rod strikes were solid hits to the flesh, causing Shi Guangjin to grimace in pain and howl incessantly. Watching from afar, the great king's second consort Shu Quan's eyelids were also twitching wildly, and alarm bells were ringing in her heart. She inwardly warned herself, "Don't bump into the crown princess, this ominous star." Some people were born not to be trifled with. The maidservant was even more alarmed by her earlier ramblings. The prince consort was right. One should be careful and prudent in whatever they did and said. A single mishap, and they would end up like this third young master of the state Duke of Qing's estate. Not only would they lose all face, but they would also be covered in bruises. Those imperial court officials and family members, who had dismounted from their horses and alighted from their carriages, only dared to watch from afar. The crown princess angrily rebuked the state Duke of Qing's estate's third son. Who would dare to go and persuade such a big commotion? Who would dare to step forward and be the bird? After 170 rods, Shi Guangjin only felt that the place where he was beaten was already about to smoke from the pain, and his flesh was probably about to rot. The two lowly soldiers' beatings were also very torturous. When the rod struck down, it would bounce in the opposite direction. It looked like the blows were quite light, but in reality, there were clots of blood under the skin. Even if Shi Guangjin was a level 8 mystic cultivator, he still had to properly drink a pot of blood. At this time, the crowd was slightly clamorous. The carriages and such in the distance all moved to the side to make way for the people who were dashing over. The person in the lead was a man in his 50s. He was hale and hearty with bright eyes, and when he flew over in court attire, his footsteps were vigorous and vigorous. Behind him was a man in his 30s, who closely followed behind him with a majestic gait. When Lightning saw the newcomers, his expression changed slightly, and he lowered his head to whisper into the crown princess's ear. "Crown princess, State Duke of Qing and eldest young master have arrived." Arbor looked up and coldly swept a glance over. His gaze landed on a young man, wearing a white fox fur coat behind the two. This person had a sickly look on his face, but his appearance was not bad. His eyebrows were raised, and his black eyes were bright. He was supporting an old woman as he walked over. Behind the two of them were 5 or 6 madams and young misses. When the madam saw Shi Guangjin being tortured on the ground, she immediately let out a sorrowful cry and was about to rush forward. However, Duke Qing and the old woman glared at him coldly at the same time, and he could only freeze on the spot. Arbor stood up with a cold glint in his eyes. He didn't have stage fright when he met Duke Qing. "Duke Qing, you've brought your family here. Are you here to denounce me?" "Father, save me, father. Father, save me." When Shi Guangjin saw his father, brother and others coming, he struggled with all his might and screamed. Hui Feng, who was standing behind Arbor, was sweating profusely. This matter was really getting bigger and bigger. He secretly prayed in his heart that Duke Qing had grasped the situation well. He felt that if the crown princess in front of him wanted to punish someone, she would definitely do it to the end. If the state Duke of Qing dared to obstruct her halfway, the crown princess wouldn't spare him either. Fortunately, the state Duke of Qing wasn't like his brainless third son at all. He was here to ask for punishment. "Shut up, you bastard," Duke Qing angrily rebuked, exasperated at his son's failure to live up to his expectations. "This subject deserves 10,000 deaths. This subject was not strict enough in teaching his son. I was shocked to hear that my son had offended the crown princess in front of Huabei Gate. Please forgive him." Chapter 835. Aren't you angry at me for beating your son 200 times? Arbor asked coldly. There was no expression on his paralyzed little face. My son offended the crown princess, so he deserved it. Although the crown princess was still expressionless, Lightning, Huifeng, and the others standing behind her could feel that the crown princess's imposing manner had loosened a bit. They couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. Duke Qing's eldest son, Shi Guangfeng, glanced at his third brother Shi Guangjin. When he saw that his brother's buttocks were already bloody, a trace of unwillingness flashed through his eyes. He took a step forward and knelt on one knee in front of Arbor. My younger brother rudely offended the crown princess. As the eldest brother, I was also in the wrong for not being strict enough. I, Guangfeng, am willing to take the rest of the beatings in place of my younger brother. Arbor's cold gaze fell on Shi Guangfeng. He looked at this man who didn't have a particularly outstanding appearance, but was full of righteousness. Shi Guangfeng was a famous young general in the army. At the age of 28, he had already been conferred the title of Yangwei General. Xiao Mu's gaze made everyone in the state Duke of Qing's estate tense up at once. In particular, Shi Guangfeng's wife, Madame Su, was tightly clenching the handkerchief in her hand and looking at her husband worriedly. After a long while, just as everyone's breathing was getting heavier and they were about to suffocate, Xiao Mu suddenly raised her hand. Stop. In fact, the two soldiers were already covered in cold sweat when the people from Duke Qing's mansion arrived. They were also under a lot of pressure, as they heavily reprimanded Shi Guangjin in front of Duke Qing and Yangwei General. When they heard the crown princess's shout, they hurriedly put away their batons and returned to the troops behind Huifeng. Duke Qing, do you know why I publicly beat your third son? Arbor moved his finger and took out the listening talisman. He directly played Shi Guangjin's original voice for Duke Qing's family to hear. Bastard! Bastard! Duke Qing was so angry that smoke came out of his head. This bastard was actually his son? He had served the country and the people all his life. How could he have given birth to such an ignorant little bastard? What did he do? Your son rushed up and tried to knock over my family's carriage. My parents and siblings are all in the car. I once swore to the heavens, if anyone dares to hurt my family, I will make them pay for it. Duke of Qing, for the sake of the crown prince, for the sake of you and General Yang Wei, I will let him go today. Arbor's voice was so cold that it made people feel as if they were in hell. You have to bring him back and discipline him well. If he runs into me again, I'll kill him. The Duke of Qing's heart was greatly shaken by these last few words. The General of Prestige also abruptly raised his head to look at this young girl with an astonishing aura. There were more than 100 people in the huge arena, including those who were watching the show. No one dared to make a sound. The Duke of Qing didn't even dare to look directly at the crown princess' eyes, which were as cold as snow. The sound of horse hooves came from outside Huabei Gate. The rider was so fast that his figure was like a swan. In an instant, he arrived in front of Arbor and the others. Prince Emo dismounted from his horse and rushed to Arbor's side with a whoosh. He stretched out his arm and hugged her. He pulled her over and looked her up and down. Jojo, what's the matter? Are you hurt? Everyone chuckled. Why didn't they know that His Highness was blind before? Shi Guangjin was lying there covered in blood. As soon as he rushed over, the first thing he asked was if the crown princess was hurt. Chapter 836. I'm fine. The little stoic calmly shook her head. Seeing that he hadn't had time to change out of his court robes, she knew that he must have run over right after finishing the opening ceremony. This was indeed the case. The State Duke of Qing had also rushed over after receiving the news after the opening ceremony ended. The Crown Prince had even gone to the study to speak with the Great King for a while. It was only after he left the royal study that he was informed that his darling had quarreled with the State Duke of Qing's third son at Huabei Gate. He had rushed over. So how could he have bothered to change his clothes? He was worried that his lovely wife would be taken advantage of. Your Highness, please forgive us. The State Duke of Qing and General Yang Wei hastily bowed and begged for forgiveness. Prince Emo was just about to reprimand them when the little stoic tugged at the corner of his shirt. All right, I'm fine. It's just that Mom and the others suffered a bit of a shock. Arbor naturally wouldn't let that person off easily if someone came looking for trouble on the first day of the new year. How could Wei Ziqin, Xiao Zhongbang, and the others still sit in the carriage? They all got out at this time. Mom, are you alright? Prince Emo ran up to support her. Everyone's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets when they heard him call her Mom so smoothly. Wei Ziqin hastily pulled his hand down and saluted in deadly earnest. Greetings to the Crown Prince. Prince Emo hastily reached out to support her, and didn't pay much attention to how the others looked. Could it be that she wasn't Jojo's mother his mother, so what if he called her Mom? At this time, Xiao Zhongbang had already exchanged a few pleasantries with the State Duke of Qing. The State Duke of Qing repeatedly apologized, and Xiao Zhongbang hastily pacified him. The bloodied Shiguangjin had already been helped down. Madame Nahi of Duke of Qing secretly wiped her tears on the side. Jin was beaten too miserably. You still dare to say that? The old madam of the State Duke of Qing estate glared at her hatefully. If you hadn't indulged him all along, would he have gotten to this point today? How many times have I warned you? If Jin doesn't control his temper, sooner or later, he will bring disaster to the whole family. Grandmother, don't be angry. The sickly second son of Duke Qing's mansion, Shi Guangyun, hurriedly said softly. Old Madam reached out to pat her second grandson's hand. Looking at Madame He's pouting lips, she couldn't help but get angry. Look at what your son and daughter have become. Grandmother, if you want to talk about third brother, then talk about third brother. Why do you have to bring me your granddaughter into this? Next to Madame He, an 18-year-old girl couldn't help but talk back. For the sake of her face, old Madame could only glare fiercely at that young girl. She turned her head and looked at Madame He with disdain. Look at the good daughter you taught. Help me walk. It's grandmother. Another young lady of about the same age came forward to support the old madam. She looked gentle, elegant and delicate. On the other side, the Arbor family also got into the carriage. At this time, with Crown Prince Emo following beside the carriage, how would the numerous carriages and horses in front dare to act rashly? They all hurriedly moved to the side, forcibly opening up a spacious path for the Qiao family to pass through first. Brother-in-law, Happy New Year. Take your New Year's money. Oh, mother, why are you covering my mouth? Xiao Lin lifted the curtain. When Emo Lien heard the word brother-in-law, it was very much to her liking. She immediately laughed heartily, as she took out the New Year's gift she had people prepare in advance, and handed it through the window. Xiao Sin's eyes lit up. He immediately closed the window and followed Xiao Lin's tone and said something. Wei Ziqin was both amused and annoyed as she knocked her son's little head. Don't learn good things. See you tomorrow. I fell asleep. My throat hurts from coughing. Sigh. Chapter 837. The little monk chanted a Buddhist proclamation and clasped his hands together. Wealth is merely a worldly possession. How can a person wholeheartedly stare at? Arbor casually picked up a pastry and stuffed it into his small mouth, immediately silencing the little monk. Who knew where this child learned his nagging habit from at such a young age? She could see now that great Master Kongyin didn't bring him along on the journey, probably because this child's nagging gave him a headache. Prince Emo urged his horse to follow beside the carriage, so the journey was naturally very smooth. His small eyes would secretly peek at his wifey in the carriage from time to time. Seeing that her complexion wasn't that good, Prince Mo's heart was in a mess. Arbor was indeed a bit stifled. She hadn't even entered the palace on the first day of the new year. Yet this kind of incident had already happened. She didn't know what kind of rumors were spreading inside and outside the palace right now. When she entered the palace later, she would be endlessly vexed just by recognizing people. The small banquet that Her Majesty the Queen held before the new year was only a small-scale one. So many royal concubines, princes and princesses didn't attend. Even if not all of them would attend today's New Year's banquet, she reckoned that at least 80 to 90% of their relatives would attend. A layer of frost covered the little stoic's face. Whenever she recalled that Prince Emo had 15 to 16 siblings, her head would ache endlessly. Just the fucking concubines alone numbered several dozen. The old great king really was a scoundrel. He married one concubine after another, and gave birth to a string of children. Just looking at it was irritating. Jojo. Prince Emo cautiously called out to his wifey through the carriage curtain. Arbor looked up and rolled her eyes grumpily at him. Prince Mo's heart thumped again, and he immediately thought of the source of the disaster. Jojo, if you're still unhappy, I'll order people to take care of Shi Guangjin. That son of a bitch. His father, Qiao Zhongbang, who was holding a cup of tea, freaking shuddered, and he hastily called out, Jojo? I see that you're not happy. The little fellow rolled her eyes at him again. Prince Emo immediately gave her an aggrieved look. Jojo, I'm fine. Wei Ziqing couldn't hold it in and burst out laughing. She reached out to put down the curtain. All right. We're about to enter the palace. Don't be like this in front of outsiders. In the eyes of outsiders, the way this young couple interacted with each other was like a pair of sweet, inseparable lovers. The crown prince could only sigh when he couldn't see his little wife. He urged his horse to follow the carriage, thinking that once they entered the palace, he would find an opportunity to privately comfort his little wife. Get someone to investigate why that Shi Guangjin is so stupid that he wants to fight with me. There had to be a reason for this. Arbor didn't believe that two people who didn't even know each other would be at loggerheads the moment they met. The little fellow lifted the curtain and swayed her tender little face in front of the crown prince, causing a certain someone's heart to flutter. I've already investigated. We'll get back to you soon. Emo Lien had already sent someone to investigate. You're not allowed to smile at me. The little fellow's wooden face was expressionless. Why? Prince Emo paused, and the smile froze on his face. You're annoying me. Darling Qiao slammed the curtain and put it down. Just now, when she saw the crown prince galloping over on his horse, she inexplicably felt that he was so handsome that it was infuriating. Chapter 838. At this moment, when she saw Crown Prince Emo grinning at her with a pair of curved phoenix eyes that rippled with ripples, her small heart actually started pounding madly uncontrollably. Io. This was her heart. How could it not be controlled by her? So it was all his fault, causing her to be unable to control her heart. Smile, 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 what smile? You're not allowed to smile at me. The moment she put down the curtain, she could still hear his hearty laughter. The little fellow was so angry that she ground her teeth and twitched her fingers. Qiao Zhongbang looked at his daughter with fear and trepidation. What did he think she was going to do? In the end, he saw the little fellow take out a fresh carrot from her inner world and bite down on it with a crunching sound. She thought that a certain person's big head was biting down. Wei Ziqing was immediately amused. She wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulder and pinched her little face with a smile. She felt that the little fellow was a bit cute when she was angry, and she was even more lively than usual when she was expressionless. The carriage entered Huabei Gate and smoothly entered the Forbidden Palace. They followed the spacious path paved with limestone slabs all the way to the entrance of Kongjian Gate before stopping. Once they reached the inner door, everyone had to get off the carriage and change into a carriage or a small sedan. The crown prince's carriage had already stopped at the side. Prince Emo flipped off his horse and ran to the side of the carriage. He saw the little fellow peeking out of the carriage with a carrot in her mouth. He didn't even think before picking her up. When he looked down, he couldn't help but be amused. Jojo, are you hungry? Don't worry, I've prepared breakfast for you in the carriage. Let's eat a bit before we go. Benefactor, men and women shouldn't touch each other. Shut up. Prince Emo looked down in annoyance at the little baldy, who reached out to grab a corner of his robe. Have you done your morning ritual? Yes, I've done half of it. The little baldy inexplicably answered, looking a bit guilty. What do you mean half of it? Emo Lien pulled a long face and scolded in a low voice. It was really quite frightening. The little monk was a bit frightened and answered in a trembling voice. That's because Essa's sister wants to run away. Arbor glanced at the two of them in annoyance. Continue your chanting after dinner. Don't disturb him in Jojo's private time. Oh. The little monk knew that he was in the wrong. Prince Emo stretched out his hand and carried him to the carriage. He picked up his vegetarian meal and tasted it. Then her big eyes suddenly lit up. Delicious! Wei Ziqin and the others also boarded their own sedans, parting ways with Qiao Zhongbang and Qiao Senator. The lunch banquet for the families of the officials of the 5th rank and above was divided into male and female guest banquets. The male guests went to the Qin Palace. The female guests all went to the Queen's Central Palace to pay their New Year's greetings first, then eat dumplings together to fill their stomachs. The New Year's banquet would begin at noon. In the evening, the great king and queen invited officials of the 3rd rank and above, and their families to a banquet for the 8 great aristocratic families in the capital. This was a great effort to save face for the 8 great clans. Martial arts were prevalent in Seacombe Planet, and the status of the 8 great aristocratic families in the capital wasn't inferior to the 3 dukes and 6 marquises. The banquet in the evening was hosted by the great king and queen, and held in the garden of Qingshui Fine Park. The banquet didn't discriminate between men and women. After all, those invited were aristocratic families who didn't care about trifles, so there was no need to talk about male and female distinctions. It was said that this Qingshui Fine Park was a newly built scenic spot in the palace. There were 3 other gardens in the entire garden, so it was naturally impossible to visit all of them in one night. And the banquet was mainly held in Qingshui Fine Park's southern courtyard. Chapter 839. I went to that Clearwater Fine Park, and it's really built well. The crown prince hugged his little wife and fed her, as if no one else was around. He even said in a small voice, "If you like it, let's have Imperial Father give this park to you to play with." The great king, who was laughing and chatting with Su Pingyong and a few close officials in the king's palace, suddenly felt his nose itch, and he hurriedly suppressed his indecent sneeze. There's a hot spring in that park, and there's also a large pool that flows around half of the garden. The small pavilion is elegant, and the scenery is pleasant. At night, the luminous pearls set in the flower garden will all shine. It's so beautiful, you'll definitely like it. Arbor rolled her eyes at him in annoyance. Why would I want to live in such a big park by myself? Prince Emo lowered his head and smiled foolishly at his wife, and couldn't help but kiss her. Jojo, you're so nice. You're so virtuous. When darling Qiao heard the word virtuous, she couldn't help but feel a chill run down her spine. A little demoness like her who killed people like scything flax, how could she be virtuous? She really didn't know how the crown prince's eyes grew. Oh right. Jung He also invited the capital's recently famous Luo family troupe to sing an opera. As the crown prince spoke, he scooped another spoonful of osmanthus soup for the little fellow, and let her swallow it without any explanation. In the past, the royal troupe was invited to sing every year, but they couldn't come up with anything new. Jung He suggested letting the Luo family troupe sing, and it seems to be quite popular with the madams and misses. Do you like it? He scooped another spoonful for her. Arbor angrily reached out to stop his fingers. I can't eat anymore. What if you lose weight if you eat so little? Take the last bite. The crown prince blinked. He just liked to feed her. As he spoke, he even reached out to touch her soft little body. Look so thin. Arbor had no choice but to finish the last bite before reaching out to push him. Go away, the little monk is here. The little monk is busy chanting scriptures. The little monk sits by their feet. After finishing his vegetarian meal, he closes his eyes and starts reciting scriptures. He doesn't disturb Emolien's Arbor. Arbor couldn't help but find it funny. Casting a glance at him, he asked, "Hasn't Lady Zheng been stripped of her responsibility to manage the 3 palaces and 6 halls? Why are you interfering with the New Year's banquet? Moreover, wasn't she pregnant? Why was she still worrying?" "Who knows?" Emolien snorted and lowered his head to look at his little wife. "Could it be that you think that she has an ulterior motive for inviting the Luo family troupe into the palace?" Arbor was just about to speak when he took out a communication jade charm from his inner world. He touched it with his finger, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. The Night Pavilion has sent word. Within half a month of Wu Xiaosu's imprisonment, Shi Guangjin had visited her 3 times. If you want to know the specifics, you'll have to investigate further. Arbor put away the communication jade charm. I couldn't tell that Shi Guangjin was such an affectionate person. There's no need to investigate further. She only needed to know who was adding fuel to the fire. Arbor's tone was somewhat mocking. Emolian frowned. Are we going to deal with that Wu Xiaosu? There's no need for that. Arbor shook his head. She's someone who can't walk out of prison. There's no need to go through the trouble. Did Wu Xiaosu think that the golden cicada she fed her was still the original poison? She had already modified it. If she could walk out of prison in 3 months, then she could only blame Arbor's lack of skill. As they spoke, the carriage arrived outside the central palace. Chapter 840. Jojo, I can only see you at night. Emolian didn't let go of his little lady. Be careful. If you encounter any trouble, immediately send me a message. I know. When he recalled Yoonhee's actions, he didn't know what she was up to, so he could only deal with whatever came his way. Wei Ziqin and her second daughter also alighted from the sedan and walked over to bid farewell to the Crown Prince. Hence, Crown Prince Emo gloomily watched as his wife walked into the central palace and left with the little monk. At this time, many upper-class madams and young misses had already gathered inside the Queen's brilliant sun hall. The Qiao family trio had arrived relatively late and was delayed at Huabei Gate. Thus, as soon as they entered, they received many sparkling gazes. It was one thing to see the Qiao family trio at the small banquet before the new year, since they had already witnessed the Crown Princess's prowess. But most people hadn't seen her before, especially the family members of those 4th and 5th rank officials. Right now, they were all curiously sizing up this little lady, who suddenly ascended to the heavens in a single bound and became the Crown Princess. She really looked quite young. They wondered if she had reached marriageable age yet. 100 or so small tables had been set up on both sides of the hall. There was a spacious passageway in the middle, and at the end of a dozen or so steps, Queen Zhao sat loftily with pursed lips, looking down at everyone inside Brilliant Sun Hall. In the morning, she had received news that Her Majesty the Queen Dowager had sent someone to deliver that she had encountered Yuer at Ziyu Mountain Villa, so she had left this naughty little grandson to celebrate the new year with her in the mountain villa. When she thought of how disobedient her youngest son was, the queen felt very uncomfortable. Now that she looked at this stoic-faced eldest daughter-in-law, she was even angrier. The mother and daughters of the Qiao family stepped forward and respectfully paid their respects to the queen. In terms of etiquette, no one could find any fault. But the queen felt stifled. Look at the Shu family's 4th Miss Shu Hui. She was so considerate and proper. Not only did she personally present a painting, but she also came early in the morning with Madame Shu to pay her respects. This was what a daughter-in-law should do. Look at the little stoic's languid appearance. What time was it already? He had just arrived at the Brilliant Sun Hall. The first thing the concubines asked when they came in to wish her a happy new year was, "Where is the Crown Princess?" When she saw the little stoic for the first time, she couldn't suppress the discomfort in her heart and wanted to ruthlessly explode. However, noble consort Zheng cut her off with a chuckle. "Crown Prince Consort, you really didn't come early. Her Majesty the Queen has been waiting for you since early in the morning. I didn't think that she would wait until now. Have you repaired your sleeping quarters in Sephora Flower Palace?" Arbor coldly shifted his gaze and stared at Consort Zheng. Consort Zheng was so shocked that she felt a chill run down her spine. Her fingers on the armrest twitched involuntarily. Damn it. She was so frightened by this girl that her body trembled a little. Consort Zheng was furious. The noble women below were also whispering to each other, talking about how Consort Zheng's bedchamber had been smashed a while ago. Wasn't it precisely the Crown Princess who did it? Now that the Crown Princess was greeting Consort Zheng to her face, her tone was rather sarcastic. It was obvious that she didn't care about the noble consort at all. Noble Consort Zheng's face trembled slightly, and she forcefully suppressed the anger in her heart. She forced a smile at Xiao Mu with great difficulty, before forcing out a sentence from between her teeth. The Crown Prince Consort really knows how to crack jokes. You know very well whether I'm joking or not. Chapter 841. Consort Zheng's face instantly filled with anger. Just as she was about to explode, she suddenly changed her mind and reached out to clutch her stomach, crying out, "I am my stomach, my stomach." The accompanying palace maid, Kaling, hurried forward and anxiously supported Consort Zheng's body while shouting, "Your Majesty the Queen! Your Majesty the Queen! I beg of you to uphold justice. The Crown Princess has angered Her Majesty the noble consort to the point that her stomach hurts." Wei Ziqin's expression changed greatly. She reached out to grab her daughter's small hand and sternly glared at the palace maid called Kaling. "Don't speak nonsense. Casually slandering the Crown Princess should be punished with capital punishment." Arbor patted the back of her mother's hand to reassure her. Her cold gaze swept over Consort Zheng, and the corner of her mouth hooked up. "Xiao Yao, go invite Dr. Chow from the Imperial Physician Building to come over. Just say that Consort Zheng's stomach hurts, and have him come over to take a look." Yes. Xiao Yao didn't suspect anything and nodded to leave. Consort Zheng's hand that was clutching her stomach stiffened slightly. Then her expression changed greatly. "Stop. Crown Princess, there's no need for you to worry about this. I've always had a doctor I'm familiar with to treat me. There's no need for you to interfere." "How can that be?" Arbor walked step by step in front of Consort Zheng. Her dark eyes coldly stared at her. "If I don't invite the head doctor over to take a look, what if something happens to Yung He, and she insists on blaming it on me? Then wouldn't I be unable to wash away this filth, even if I jumped into Wanghai, HM? What a formidable crown princess." Everyone was slightly shocked and looked over in awe. Only noble Consort Zheng and Kaling were looking into Qiao Mu's eyes. They only felt like there were countless bony arms in the depths of those eyes that wanted to pull them, master and servant, into the abyss of hell. Consort Zheng shrieked in surprise. Without caring about her image, she shrank behind Kaling. "Enough!" Queen Zhao was furious. It was the first day of the first lunar month, and she had already given her so much trouble. She didn't like Consort Zheng, and she didn't like this crown princess either. He only felt that the two of them, one big and one small, were both troublemakers. As soon as they bumped into each other, they started arguing with each other. "Crown Princess, our Imperial Highness is pregnant. Can you please speak nicely to her?" Kaling cried as she begged, putting on the appearance of a loyal servant. Arbor sneered and asked in a voice so low that only the master and servant could hear. "Pregnant? Are you sure?" Consort Zheng's expression changed abruptly. Her resentful eyes were filled with disbelief. She looked at Arbor in horror. Qiao Mu's lips cracked open like a wooden carving, and she gazed icily at noble Consort Zheng and her servant. She asked coldly, "What if I make this matter known to the world?" "Don't!" Noble Consort Zheng cried out in alarm, sensing the queen and many royal concubines casting puzzled gazes at her. She immediately straightened her body, as a chill ran down her spine. She straightened her face and said, "Kaling, don't speak nonsense. My stomach is just feeling a bit uncomfortable. You're making a fuss about nothing. What if you wrongly blame the crown princess? What should we do?" Queen Zhao's cold gaze landed on Consort Zheng, as if she wanted to burn a hole in her face. She wanted to see why she suddenly changed her attitude. Noble Consort Zheng stood up by herself and forcefully supported Kaling's hand, saying, "Help me to sit over there." It wasn't until she returned to her seat that noble Consort Zheng looked at the crown prince consort, who had sat down on her own in shock. Chapter 842. Since the crown princess already knew about this, why didn't she directly inform Her Majesty the Queen? Therefore, it could be said that the crown princess also had some opinions about Her Majesty the Queen. If she could grasp the animosity between the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law and exploit it, then perhaps she could. In reality, Consort Zheng was truly overthinking things. The little stoic had never viewed Consort Zheng as an enemy, and she couldn't be bothered to meddle in the harem's trifling affairs. In her eyes, Consort Zheng was already a dead person. It was only a matter of time, and she wouldn't be able to do it for too long. So why should she waste the effort? Moreover, she only had her initial suspicions before. After all, the special beautifying pill state Uncle Zheng purchased, at an astronomical price, also had other special medicines added to it besides heat poison. This medicine could guarantee that Consort Zheng wouldn't be able to conceive in this lifetime. However, she was only suspicious at the beginning and wasn't certain. She didn't expect that she would be duped into revealing her fake pregnancy as soon as they met. It was truly hilarious. After Arbor returned to her seat, various royal concubines came forward to greet her one after another. She greeted them one by one in a distant yet courteous manner, before minding her own business, and whispering to Jolin, "Princess Anam arrives." After the announcement, a thin woman fully dressed as a princess consort walked in from the long passageway outside the hall. "This subject greets Her Majesty the Queen. Please rise, Princess Consort." Queen Zhao still had a smile on her face when she saw Wu Hongma. The vassal king of Yan'an was one of the vassals conferred by the late emperor with a different surname, so the queen naturally had more respect for Princess Anam. "Princess Consort, you've lost a lot of weight," Queen Zhao said after glancing at Wu Hongma. "I've troubled Her Majesty the Queen to worry." Wu Hongma smiled and sighed, either intentionally or unintentionally. "Today is the first day of the first month of the new year, a day for family reunions. I'm not afraid that Her Majesty the Queen will laugh at me. Today my sister-in-law woke up early in the morning and went to visit Xiaosu. Poor Xiaosu, a young lady, is being tortured in that kind of dark and gloomy place." The queen's expression turned a bit awkward, and she even snuck a glance at Xiao Mu. Her son was the one who had caught her. No matter what, she would not let her son lose face and make the decision to release her. She saw the little stoic talking to her younger sister in a low voice, and didn't even glance at Wu Hongma out of the corner of her eye. Perhaps she was pretending not to see Princess Anam. "Your Highness." Princess Anam suddenly knelt down. "This subject has a presumptuous request." Queen Zhao's expression changed slightly, and her eyes became sharp. "Princess Consort, the New Year's banquet is about to begin. You should quickly return to your seat." Wu Hongma said loudly, "This subject earnestly requests the crown princess to be merciful and pardon my niece Wu Xiaosu's wrongdoings, and release her from prison." Queen Zhao rubbed her forehead as she felt a headache coming on. This morning's events had really made her feel sick. Queen Zhao's gaze fell on Arbor. Many royal concubines, commandery princesses, noble madams, and young misses also turned their gazes towards Arbor. Xiao Lin pursed her lips and tugged at her sister's sleeve. She couldn't help but be furious. Vexing matters were everywhere in the palace. After getting rid of a consort Zheng, another princess consort jumped out. No wonder sister didn't like her. Arbor slowly looked up, and his chilly gaze landed on Wu Hongma. His voice was frosty as he said, "I've never been merciful. I only have killing intent." Chapter 843. Princess Anam was taken aback. She stared at Arbor with a tense expression, and the wrinkles on her face could simply squash a fly to death. The crown princess completely didn't follow the script. How was she supposed to continue acting out her own story? She originally thought that if she cried in this brilliant sun hall, the little girl would definitely panic due to her inexperience of the world. Perhaps she would reluctantly agree to release Xiaosu, because she couldn't bring herself to go. As long as the little girl said okay, in this brilliant sun hall, even if she wanted to go back on her word afterward, she, Wu Hongma, would definitely have a way to make her unable to regret and swallow her grievances. Who knew that this little girl's words and actions would completely exceed her expectations, making her at a loss for words? Wu Hongma sneered, and simply turned to face Arbor. She feigned a curtsy and wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes as she said, "Crown Princess, please take pity on this aunt's heart. Xiaosu is still alone in prison at the beginning of the new month. If she previously offended you in any way, she has already repaid what she should after being imprisoned for these dozen days. Please." The little stoic's cold face didn't bat an eyelid. Wu Hongma pretended to kneel down and bent her knees as she lamented, Do you want this old one to kneel down in front of you before you'll release her? This was coercion. All the noble ladies and madams with royal mandates in the hall were dead silent. And only Wei Ziqin was so angry that her entire body was trembling. She abruptly stood up and angrily said, "Vassal King Consort of Anan, speaking of which, you are also the Crown Prince Consort's elder. You're making a scene in this hall without any regard for face, and crying, and making a racket like a shrew. You're deliberately torturing the Crown Prince Consort." "Mother, it's fine." The stoic face was still expressionless as she sent her mother a placating glance. "Please sit down." She then set her gaze on Wu Hongma. "Princess Anam, why aren't you kneeling?" Arbor asked icily. "It's been a while since you said you'd kneel. Your knees aren't broken, right? It's not like this crown princess can't accept your kneeling." Everyone was dumbfounded. The entire hall was so silent that even a pin drop could be heard. Queen Zhao also sat up straight. That day, when she heard that the crown princess had smashed the classics reverence hall, hit beautiful Huang, and kicked Consort Zheng, she had only heard about it. She had never seen it with her own eyes. Today, she saw that her daughter-in-law was indeed not a good person. Princess Anam was probably going to be in trouble today. Everyone cried out in their hearts. Wu Hongma's face slightly trembled. If she wasn't in the brilliant Sun Hall, she would have jumped up and wanted to tear apart Arbor's mouth. It was simply too depressing and infuriating. Arbor glanced at her coldly, gripped the teacup tightly and snorted. "So it's just a show. I originally thought that you loved your niece very much, but I didn't expect that you're nothing more than this. You can't even bend your knees, let alone talk about anything else. Let me tell you, Wu Xiaosu's 3-month prison sentence can't be reduced by a single day. You want to fish her out with just a few words? It's not that easy." The teacup in Arbor's hand turned into fine powder with a bang. "Death or 3-month prison. Choose for yourself." A deathly silence pervaded the entire brilliant Sun Hall. No one dared to breathe loudly. They didn't expect that a little girl could emit such a frightening aura. At this moment, not to mention the others, even Princess Anam was endlessly shocked. Chapter 844. Wu Hongma even felt a bit of regret at this time. She had said that this matter wouldn't work, but her sister-in-law was so annoying that she had to beg the queen for mercy on the first day of the new year. Wasn't this a piece of iron that had been kicked so hard that her foot hurt unbearably? Wu Hongma couldn't continue singing at this time. Standing on the stage, she couldn't get up or down. Her entire body was stiff and extremely awkward. Fortunately, someone announced that noble Lady Ying had arrived at this time. Everyone's gaze turned to the door. If there wasn't a good reason for her to be late at this time, then it would be considered disrespectful to Her Majesty the Queen. Sure enough, Queen Zhao's expression instantly became very unsightly. Her line of sight seemed to be coated in a layer of ice, as it landed on the beautiful figure that gracefully walked in from the door. This beauty was no more than 16 years old. Her small face was like a freshly peeled egg, white with a hint of pink. Her pair of eyes were as soft as water, as if they could suck in a man's soul with a single glance. No wonder His Majesty had been running to Yingluo Market every day recently. When Consort Zheng saw this woman, she clenched her silver teeth, wishing that she could swallow her whole. It was this slut who had pretended to faint on the side of the road in broad daylight, encountered the great king by chance, and climbed onto the dragon bed in one step. This concubine pays respects to Her Majesty the Queen, and wishes everyone well. The little girl timidly spoke in a small and weak voice, as if she was afraid that someone would startle her. Consort Zheng said with a fake smile, "Oh, noble Lady Ying, you really are a noblewoman with a lot of matters. Coming to pay Her Majesty the Queen a New Year's greeting at this time. Such arrogance." Queen Zhao's expression darkened as she coldly stared at noble Lady Ying. Consort Zheng's few words naturally couldn't incite her anger. Consort Zheng was eager for her to punish this little dainty girl. So why should she fulfill her wish? Noble Lady Ying wasn't one to be spoiled. Seeing the situation, she obediently knelt down and kowtowed to Queen Zhao. Only then did she say unhurriedly, "This concubine had left early in the morning. This concubine also wanted to pay a New Year's visit to Her Majesty the Queen. The timing couldn't be wrong. Noble Consort Zheng couldn't stand Noble Consort Ying's delicate and meek appearance the most, so when she heard Noble Consort Ying's words, she rolled her eyes at Noble Consort Ying from the back, and the corner of her mouth involuntarily turned up. Unfortunately, this concubine encountered. Her voice trailed off as she cast an unnatural glance in Noble Consort Zheng's direction. When Consort Zheng saw her acting like this, she couldn't help but get angry. Noble Lady Ying, are you trying to say that it's this consort's fault that you're late? This concubine does not dare. Ying Guiran said in a delicate and timid voice. Then, she lowered her head and looked like she was ready to be punished. She didn't say anything else. Queen Zhao's heart was filled with annoyance, but she still asked, "What is it? There's no harm in you telling me. Her Majesty the Queen is wise. This concubine was on my way here this morning when I met the 15th princess wet nurse. She cried and begged everywhere to find a doctor from the Imperial Physician building to treat her." Noble Lady Ying sighed and said, "This concubine saw that wet nurse holding the princess and felt that she was truly pitiful. Thus, I instructed the palace maid Suiqiao to take my name card and go to the Imperial Physician building to invite the Imperial Physician on duty here. This delay is truly this concubine's fault. This concubine asks for your Majesty's forgiveness." On the side, Consort Qing couldn't help but burst out in laughter. So this really is Noble Lady's fault. Look at how she's tormented Noble Lady Ying. Chapter 845. Consort Zheng's expression instantly became unsightly. When Queen Zhao saw this, she felt much more at ease, and even inwardly praised Noble Lady Ying for being so considerate. However, on the surface, she worriedly assumed the posture of a matriarch and asked, "How is my poor little 15th now?" Replying to Your Highness, the 15th princess condition has stabilized after the doctor's examination. However, the doctor also said that the 15th princess' illness still requires someone to take care of her closely. As she spoke, she obediently knelt there without moving, looking like she was waiting for the queen's punishment. Queen Zhao smiled without batting an eyelid. "Noble Lady Ying, you can rise. You saved little 15th's life, so being a little late is nothing. You've done well. Come reward her." Noble Consort Jing's expression turned especially unsightly all of a sudden, and her sharp fingernails nearly pierced into her palms. She cursed that damn wet nurse a million times in her mind as malicious thoughts surged violently in her mind. "Thank you, Your Highness the Queen." Noble Lady Ying smiled bashfully and accepted the queen's reward from the tray. She bowed and retreated to the side, sitting down in a well-behaved manner. Arbor glanced at her. The two of them were seated quite far from each other, with quite a few princesses and commandery princesses between them. It was also at this moment that the embarrassed Wu Hongma quietly slipped back to her seat, no longer mentioning the matter of asking for Wu Xiaosu's life. Since she didn't mention it, Arbor didn't bother to pay attention to her. Queen Zhao was currently using this as an excuse to reprimand Consort Zheng. "Younger sister Zheng, little 15th's body is weak, yet you don't know how to take care of her? If that wet nurse hadn't carried little 15th out today, and coincidentally asked Noble Lady Ying for help, how do you think this matter would have ended?" Consort Zheng couldn't help but be furious. She gritted her teeth so hard that they were broken. But on the surface, she had no choice but to stiffen her neck and turn her head to thank Noble Lady Ying from several short tables away. Noble Lady Ying shook her head. "I don't deserve Your Highness' thanks." However, the princess looked a little pitiful. It was such a cold day, yet she was only wrapped in a thin blanket. Now that Your Highness is pregnant, she's afraid that the princess's illness will pass, so it's not wrong to leave her in the side hall to recuperate. However, there are some daily necessities that should not be neglected. What? When Queen Zhao heard this, she was greatly shocked. Little 15 has just turned 3 years old. Consort Zheng, you actually threw her to a side chamber to be raised? How dare you neglect her like this? Consort Zheng's eyelids twitched. She hurriedly stood up and almost knocked over the wine beside her. No, Your Highness. Preposterous. Queen Zhao seized the opportunity to fly into a rage. The entire Brilliant Sun Hall became silent. Everyone felt that today's New Year's feast was simply challenging their hearts. Noble Consort Zheng, Vassal King Consort of Nan, Her Majesty the Crown Prince Consort, Her Majesty the Queen. All of these women of high status were playing out one drama after another. Those noble ladies and madams with titles didn't know whether they should continue sitting here or quickly withdraw and let Her Majesty the Queen handle this family matter. You're really heartless. Queen Zhao slammed the table and angrily said. No wonder that wet nurse went everywhere to seek treatment, but no one cared. So it was you. You neglected little 15th. No, Your Highness the Queen. My poor little 15th. A cold light appeared in Queen Zhao's eyes. Why haven't you brought over this queen's poor daughter, and let me take a closer look? Consort Zheng's anger rose 3 feet high, and her body suddenly turned cold for no reason. Chapter 846. This play had come so quickly that she wouldn't believe it if it wasn't deliberately set up. How could noble Lady Ying be so coincidental as to run into the wet nurse, carrying the child out to seek treatment? There was something wrong with noble Lady Ying, and there was also something wrong with the wet nurse. Consort Zheng was very anxious, and even wanted to send Kaling back to the palace to take a look. However, Queen Zhao coldly stopped her. Younger sister, it's better if you just sit here. This consort also wants to see what kind of life little 15th is living in Sephora Flower Palace. Could it be that a good princess only has a wet nurse to watch over her? Are all the other servant girls in Sephora Flower Palace dead? Sweat rolled down Consort Zheng's forehead. Your Majesty the Queen, noble Lady Ying already said that the child's treatment has been completed. Perhaps she's already asleep. A head palace maid walked in trembling with fear and asked in a small voice. Your Majesty, it's time to eat the dumplings. Should I order someone to bring them up now? Consort Zheng was furious. What time is it to eat dumplings? Scram. The head palace maid trembled. However, Queen Zhao smiled and said, just in time. Bring the dumplings up. We can eat while we wait. It won't take much time to return to Sephora Flower Palace. Consort Zheng's eyes were about to shoot out a poisonous light. This daughter of hers was indeed born to collect debts. Now that someone with ulterior motives was using her as a scapegoat, how could she not hate her to the bone? The dumplings had been made by Queen Zhao and the other noble ladies on New Year's Eve yesterday. Arbor had eaten breakfast and wasn't hungry at all. For the sake of the queen, she ate 2 dumplings as a gesture. Everyone silently ate the dumplings, not daring to speak. They didn't know what the dumplings tasted like in their stomachs. They only felt that their hearts, livers, spleens, and lungs were all trembling. This was the calm before the storm. Not long after, a thinly clothed woman was seen carrying a 3-year-old little girl. She blindly followed the palace, maid into the Brilliant Sun Hall. It was probably the first time the little girl had seen so many people. She immediately shrank into the wet nurse's arms and looked around anxiously. Queen Zhao revealed a benevolent smile and beckoned to the wet nurse. Bring little 15 over for me to take a look. The wet nurse immediately fell to her knees, trembling as she shrieked. Your Highness, please forgive me. Your Highness, please forgive me. Consort Zheng's heart was suddenly in her throat. She angrily slammed the table and stood up. Nanny, what are you doing? Come here. Arbor impatiently waved at the wet nurse. The wet nurse looked at her blankly, then raised her head to look at Queen Zhao. Come here. Arbor shouted. The wet nurse was intimidated by her imposing manner, and was so scared that she rolled and crawled over. Arbor clapped his hands at the child. Come. Little 15 turned her little head, and looked at Arbor with her eyes as red as a little rabbit's. Suddenly, she stretched out her hands to her. The wet nurse could not help but be stunned for a moment. The princess never liked other people getting close to her. Even Consort Zheng. The princess would stay far away from her whenever she saw her. Crown Princess. Queen Zhao coldly called out. Arbor indifferently raised her head to glance at her. Then she picked up little 15 and placed her on her lap. She untied the thin blanket wrapped around the child. There are bruises on her hands and legs. She was beaten just 2 days ago, Arbor said faintly as she took out a needle bag from her inner world. Her asthma isn't too serious, but she hasn't been properly nurtured since she was young. Chapter 847. Performing acupuncture 3 times can alleviate the initial symptoms. Performing acupuncture 9 times can completely cure the problem. As Arbor spoke, she had already quickly performed acupuncture on little 15th. Severe malnutrition? Arbor coldly glanced at Consort Zheng and sneered. I never thought that the child of the great Consort Zheng would also starve. Audacious Consort Zheng. Queen Zhao angrily rebuked. How did you take care of Princess 15th? Consort Zheng panicked and hurriedly explained. This concubine has always taken good care of little 15th. Your Majesty the Queen, what do you mean? Little 15th came from my stomach. Arbor didn't continue listening, nor was she interested in watching this play. She stood up and walked out of Brilliant Sun Hall with the child in her arms. When she passed by the wet nurse kneeling on the ground, she coldly glanced at her and spoke with a bit of ridicule. Selling out your master for glory. Take a guess, will your master let you off? The wet nurse looked up at her in shock, her entire body trembling like a sieve. Crown Princess, Crown Princess. Several palace maids ran over and softly reminded her. The official luncheon hasn't started yet. Did the Crown Princess not see that Her Majesty the Queen's face was already covered in dark clouds? Or could it be that the Crown Princess saw it and pretended not to? Wasn't she looking down on Her Majesty the Queen too much? I'm full. Arbor's icy gaze swept over the palace maids, scaring them into abruptly withdrawing their hands, not daring to stop her. She was never someone who would wrong herself. Since this Brilliant Sun Hall was so stuffy that she wanted to go out for a breath of fresh air. Why would she force herself to continue sitting there? This subject will go see the Crown Princess. Wei Ziqin was worried about her daughter and hurriedly pulled Jolin up. She bowed to the gloomy Her Majesty the Queen in the head seat, and then quickly pulled her daughter out. How can someone from such a small family be presentable? He doesn't know any etiquette at all. The woman who spoke was about 25 years old. She was wearing a purple gown with a red collar, embroidered with the colors of fortune and wealth. With a golden rose hairpin on her head, she looked rich and noble. Her face was beautiful, but her brows looked very harsh. This was the 4th Princess Mo Shuang, the only one in the Mo kingdom who, after getting married, made a big fuss about divorcing her husband and forcing him to his death, was now raising a gigolo. Although Queen Zhao was angry with the little stoic, she was even angrier when she saw this 4th princess. She glared fiercely at Lu Fei. Why did you also bring her here? Lu Fei was 4th princess's biological mother. She felt wronged and said, Your Majesty, today is the first day of the first lunar month, according to the rules. All right. The queen didn't have the patience to listen to Lu Fei's rebuttal. She looked coldly at Consort Zheng and said, I will report this matter to His Majesty in detail. Since you can't take care of 15th princess, then this queen will make a decision for you this time. What are you doing? Consort Zheng shouted in alarm. When Wei Ziqin chased after them with her younger daughter, she just happened to see her eldest daughter, holding a baby, and waiting for them in the corridor. When she saw her mother and younger sister coming out, Arbor's icy features relaxed slightly. She nodded at them and said, I'm fine, Mom. You don't need to worry. You child. Wei Ziqin heaved a sigh of relief. She pulled Jolin forward and reached out to hug her eldest daughter. But I'm not happy. Chapter 848. This child had been sharp since she was a child. She should be able to tell at a glance that Her Majesty the Queen didn't like her. Arbor carried little 15 and walked along the winding path of broken cobblestones. In a withered garden in winter, only a few small flowers that didn't fear the bitter cold drilled out of the ground. Because they were worried that the flowers and trees would mutate, the palace had wantonly built all kinds of gardens 2 years ago. Some of the exotic flowers and plants were directly cut down. Generally, the most common flowers that had never mutated were planted. Mom, I'm thinking, isn't this marriage a bit too rash? Xiaomu sat on a swing and lightly tapped the ground. She raised her body slightly, and raised a hand to touch the thin and weak little 15 in her arms. Wei Ziqing's eyes were filled with faint bewilderment. Could it be that her daughter's heart was beating the drums of retreat? Xiao, let mother tell you, Xiao Mo is a good child, don't take your anger out on him. Don't you think the crown prince is wronged? The trouble caused by this group of imperial concubines will be blamed on him again. Wei Ziqing was a bystander. She saw how well little Mo treated her daughter. If there was even the slightest bit of unkindness, she would definitely not agree to marry off her daughter. Mother, that wet nurse is one of the queen's people. So this scene was completely arranged by Queen Zhao. It was just that noble Lady Ying. This variable appeared midway. Or perhaps it could be said that with noble Lady Ying as a variable, this scene became even more exciting to watch. In other words, without noble Lady Ying, the wet nurse's complaint today would still be vigorously reported to the queen in front of all the madams and young misses. The queen wanted to grandly and honorably strip Consort Zheng of her daughter's custody. Wei Ziqing looked at her daughter in shock. You? How did you know? Arbor sneered and sighed softly. Perhaps my eyes are bright. Sister, you're really amazing. Jolin sat on another swing rack, with a look of admiration on her face. She looked at her sister with adoration. You can even see that. You won't be at a disadvantage in the future. Sister, the baby sitting in Arbor's arms called out incoherently. Although you have a father and a mother, you are still a poor child. Arbor stroked little 15's head, and looked into the distance. In the withering winter, her gaze seemed to fall on a faraway place. Jolin looked at her sister who was sitting beside her. She had a feeling that she couldn't touch her. It was as if his sister at this moment was just a foam-like illusion. The moment he touched her she would shatter. Jojo. Wei Ziqing couldn't bear to see this kind of empty and numb expression on this child's face the most. She hurriedly reached out, and pulled her down from the swing. She hugged her, and patted her back with all her strength. Jojo, you're my daughter. I'm here for you. Sister, little Lin, is here too. Little Lin will protect you. Jolin also jumped down from the swing. She reached out her thin little arms, and raised them high to hug her sister from behind. Arbor came back to her senses, and couldn't help but smile. What are you doing? I'm fine. She was just lamenting in her heart. Little 15 poked her little head out from between the two of them. She looked at this and then that, her eyes full of confusion. Jojo, let's go home. Chapter 849. Arbor couldn't help but chuckle. Mother, why are you being so willful? My daughter isn't happy. Can't I be willful for once? Wei Ziqing said angrily. Okay. Then let's go shopping. Jolin immediately raised both hands and feet in agreement. In your dreams. Wei Ziqing raised her hand to pat her younger daughter's head. Who would be selling things today? As the three of them were talking, the tree branch moved and Prince Mo's head suddenly popped out. Brother-in-law. Jolin called out happily. Wei Ziqing hurriedly reached out to cover her mouth. Don't make a fuss. Come, accompany mother. As she spoke, she secretly gave her son-in-law a look. The son-in-law immediately understood his mother-in-law's meaning. Your wife is in a bad mood. Arbor raised her head to glance at Prince Mo, then indifferently lowered her head again. As expected, her attitude was very distant. Prince Mo's heart skipped a beat. He hurriedly ran forward and reached out to hug her. Slap. Arbor blocked his hand and carried little 15 back to sit on her swing. She didn't even bother to look at him out of the corner of her eye. Jojo, I've heard. You've been wronged. Mo Lien hurriedly took the initiative to admit his mistake, his handsome face full of remorse. Don't worry. After this New Year's banquet ends, we won't come if there's nothing. Is noble Lady Ying the person you arranged to come in? Mo Lien's voice suddenly stopped. He cautiously glanced at Arbor. Her? What did she tell you? She's too smart. She was able to cooperate with your imperial mother halfway through the show. Arbor abruptly flung the crown prince's hand away. I won't adapt to this kind of scheming life. Instead of letting her scheme against others, she might as well clean them up with her own hands. Emolien's heart twisted. He hurriedly reached out to pull her into his arms. I didn't ask you to adapt. Do I get used to you? His head rubbed restlessly against the side of her neck. I go where you go. If you go to the sky, I will go to the sky. If you go to the sea, I will go to the sea. It's decided then. Arbor was slightly startled. Half of the resentment that he had been holding in for a long time was released. He looked at him and asked curiously, why do you always give in to me? You're my little emperor baby. What else can I do but accommodate you? Prince Emo said matter-of-factly, you like to shake off my hand when you're angry. I feel terrible. Your family is too annoying. Arbor suddenly stretched out his leg and kicked him. It's all your father's fault for marrying so many mistresses. They're always looking for trouble. Yes. It's not my fault. It's all my father's fault. Your stepmothers are all troublemakers. They're so annoying. Isn't that so? In the future, I won't enter the palace and won't see them. And your mother, look at me. My nose is not my nose and my eyes are not my eyes. It's not like I have to marry you. If it doesn't work, then even if. MMPH. Xiaomu abruptly shut her mouth. Her small mouth that had been blabbering non-stop at Emolien had already been overbearingly blocked by him. He didn't give her a chance to continue speaking. This kiss completely swallowed all of the little stoic's complaints. I'm telling you, I admit to all my mistakes, but you're not allowed to say things like forget it again. Emolien angrily bit down hard on his lips. Arbor exclaimed, were you born in the year of the dog? Emolien raised his phoenix eyes and lifted her small chin with a finger. Chapter 850. Jojo, I can do anything you want. But this is the only thing I'm not allowed to do. You're mine. I won't allow you to leave me. His ink-black phoenix eyes were filled with deep meaning, as if there was an endless whirlpool spinning inside. 2 pitch-black lotus flames leaped in the depths of his eyes. Arbor stared blankly. She stared into his eyes, lost in thought. She touched them with her little hand and muttered to herself, Emolien, your eyes. Emolien couldn't bear to hear the little fellow say things like forget it, and let's break up, with a stoic face. He didn't want her heart, which was firmly encased in a layer of ice, to shrink bit by bit again. My eyes are filled with you. He sighed softly. He reached out to grab her little paw and bit it lightly. This is your punishment for saying something you shouldn't have said. You're not allowed to say it again in the future. Arbor pulled her hand back and glared at him in annoyance. When she lowered her head, she saw little 15th staring at them curiously with wide eyes. Arbor felt even more awkward. You're so annoying. She pushed him away with a burning face. Your little sister is here. Sis. Emolien's face immediately darkened. He glanced at the child. Wrong name. Call her sister-in-law. What did the child know about sister-in-law? He only felt that Prince Mo's face was dark and scary. He quickly shrank back into his sister's warm embrace and rubbed his face against her. His expression relaxed. Your dad has so many children, but he doesn't know how to take good care of them. Arbor was furious. What a scumbag of a father. Yes. Dad is useless. Jojo is the best. Arbor rolled her eyes at him. Where did your mother send this child? Emolien paused for a moment, then said, she sent him to He Jiaoyi's place to take care of him. Duke Qing's current second wife, Madame He, is He Jiaoyi's paternal aunt. Doesn't she have a son of her own? Yes, 16 is a few months younger than 15. Oh, Arbor replied. Then he said, starting tomorrow, bring her to my house every day. I will give her another 8 injections to completely cure her asthma and nurse her body back to health. Okay. Crown Prince Emo readily agreed upon hearing this, so happy that he could soar in his heart. Wasn't this exactly what he wanted? He could see his baby Qiao every day. The two of them talked for a while, and Arbor's mood calmed down a lot. He told him to go back to the king's palace first. The lunch banquet wasn't that big of a deal. The main event was still in the evening. That was a big play between the traditional eunuch aristocratic families and the new 8 aristocratic families. Arbor was in the movie and couldn't get away. At noon, The New Year's banquet in the brilliant Sun Hall finally went smoothly. The group of people obediently finished the banquet. On the surface, they were laughing and chatting happily. It seemed as if they had already forgotten all the embarrassing things that had happened early in the morning. Consort Jung wasn't absent. No matter how angry she was, she still sat at the banquet and ate for a while without tasting her food. It was obvious that Consort Jung's smile was a bit forced. She forced herself to sit there. In reality, it wasn't very interesting. The people around her were afraid of offending her and didn't dare to speak to her. For the first time, Consort Jung experienced the feeling of being left out of the circle. A fire burned in her heart. As soon as the lunch banquet ended, she used Sephora Flower Palace as an excuse to hastily leave. Queen Zhao didn't stop her. She coldly glanced at her from the corner of her eye, and her lips hooked in a sneer. Chapter 851. After 1 o'clock in the afternoon, people from the 8 great aristocratic families would enter the palace one after another. The people from Luo family troupe were also let in from the side door at this time, preparing to start the show at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Everyone moved to Clearwater Fine Park. When the noble women heard that the Luo family troupe was invited this time, their faces instantly lit up with interest. Most of the noble ladies didn't like to watch shows, so the elders let the servant girls follow these ladies and let them stroll around Clearwater Fine Park on their own. The Luo family troupe was famous in the capital recently, especially before and after the new year. When all the aristocratic families wanted to invite guests for banquets, they couldn't help but find some troupes to sing, perform acrobatics. Those smaller aristocratic families couldn't even invite the Luo family troupe. Arbor naturally didn't have any interest in watching shows. When she asked Wei Ziqin had a look of disdain. Mother was born in the countryside and can't listen to these meaningless things. Furthermore, Wei Ziqin wasn't stupid. If she insisted on sitting among the noble ladies, she would most likely be disdained. So why would she bother to join in the fun? Then Mother, come back to the East Palace with us to rest. After the firecrackers last night, they didn't sleep well. So Arbor wanted to go back to the East Palace in the afternoon to catch up on some sleep. The 3 of them walked out of Brilliant Sun Hall. But before they could take 2 steps, they saw 3 people coming towards them. Once they met, Wei Ziqin recognized that it was the wife of Imperial College's vice principal, Madame Zhuang. The 2 ladies behind her with refined manners were the great king's second concubine, Xu Quan, and the legitimate 4th young lady, Xu Hui. What Madame Zhuang was most proud of in her life were these 2 daughters. The older one was virtuous, marrying the great king's son. The husband and wife were loving and respectful to each other. The younger one was even more beautiful, and the older one was modest, polite, gentle and filial. Ever since she reached marriageable age, matchmakers would step on her doorstep every day. Xu Hui was 18 this year, and had reached the marriageable age. Recently, there were even signs that the queen had taken a fancy to her. If the Xu family's 4th young lady was conferred as the crown prince's concubine, it would be a great thing for the Xu family. Although she was only a concubine in name, she was still the crown prince. She was truly the apple of the eye of the great king, the queen, and the empress dowager. Moreover, the crown prince didn't even have a close confidant by his side. Their family's 4th young lady was such an intelligent person. If she entered the Eastern Palace, she would be able to enjoy the moonlight first. Would she be afraid that she wouldn't be able to gain favor? The mother and daughters of the Xu family were preparing to go to the theater in Qingshui Jiyuan, but they didn't expect to bump into the mother and daughter of the Qiao family, who were just coming out. Madame Xu's expression instantly became somewhat unsightly. A few days ago, the crown princess refused to attend her eldest daughter's plum blossom banquet, which made her very unhappy. Deep down in his heart, he had already scolded him for being so shameless. Although Xu Quan persuaded her for a while, she was still a little angry. In addition, during the banquet in the morning, she had personally examined eldest young lady Qiao's conduct, and felt that this young lady was indeed from the countryside, and didn't see the big picture. In the future, This kind of little girl was going to suppress her well-educated and well-mannered youngest daughter. No matter how she thought about it, she just couldn't accept it. If it wasn't for the great king suddenly issuing an imperial edict to confer eldest young lady Qiao the title of crown princess, who knew who this crown princess position would be? Xu Quan saw that her mother had her head held high like a fighting cock, and wanted to walk straight past the mother and daughters of the Qiao family. She hurriedly tugged on her mother's sleeve and gently bowed towards Arbor. Crown Princess. Madam Qiao, second young lady Qiao. Chapter 852. Since other people were polite, Arbor was naturally polite as well. He returned a half bow and nodded. The great king's second consort, Madame Xu. Wei Ziqin took the initiative to greet Madame Zhuang. Madame Zhuang pretended to respond, her expression containing a bit of disdain. It's Madame Qiao. Xu Quan forcefully tugged at her mother's clothes, her delicate and pretty face slightly sunk. She smoothed things over and smiled at the Qiao family trio. We're just preparing to head to Clearwater Fine Park stage. Where is the crown princess going? Qiao Lin pursed her lips, her childish nature rising as she deliberately said loudly. We're waiting for brother-in-law to pick us up. Linner. Wei Ziqin patted the back of her daughter's hand and pulled her to her side. She nodded slightly at Madame Zhuang, who had an unsightly expression. My daughter spoke without thinking. Please don't take offense. Madame Zhuang snorted and said with a fake smile. Then you guys can wait here properly. When His Highness is free, he'll come over to pick you guys up. Madame Xu especially emphasized the word pick up, as if mocking the Qiao family trio's wishful thinking. It was obvious that it was impossible. His Highness was still entertaining civil and military officials in the king's palace. So how could he have the time to come to Brilliant Sun Hall to pick up the three of them? To think that they could think of such a thing. Poor upbringing. The contempt in Madame Xu's eyes truly flowed out, and it was very glaring. Qiao Lin's young and impetuous girl mentality immediately flared up. You really don't believe me? My brother-in-law will be here soon. Linner. Wei Ziqin saw that her daughter's temper had flared up, and her head was about to explode. She hastily reached out to hold her small hand. All right. Qiao Lin just couldn't bear to see others belittle her mother. This Madame Xu was like a proud peacock, even looking at people with her nostrils. Mother. On the other end, Xu Quan was also extremely embarrassed. She continuously tugged at her mother's sleeve, but Madame Xu angrily flung her hand away. Humph. Madame Zhuang glanced at Qiao Lin with displeasure. With a haughty expression she said, Madame Qiao, it's better to teach your daughter well from a young age. Look at our family's Xu Hui. Her etiquette and behavior all conform to the norms. Even Her Majesty the Queen praises her from time to time. If the second miss wants to find a good etiquette instructor, I have a good recommendation here. Otherwise, in another 2 years, when she gets older, she won't even be able to find a husband. Jolin's face turned red with anger. Wei Ziqin was so angry that her entire body trembled. Without another word, Arbor flew up and slapped Madame Xu's face. Madame Xu didn't expect that the crown princess would suddenly slap her. The sound of this slap immediately attracted a lot of attention. Madame Xu felt that she had completely lost all of her face. She was the wife of the vice principal of Imperial College, and came from a scholarly family. Yet she was embarrassed by the mother and daughter of the Qiao family today. Arbor did not stop. Could a slap be enough? It didn't exist. She couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with this Madame Xu, and directly gave her 2 more slaps. Madame Xu fell to the ground and started gasping for air. Her gaze was filled with terror. During the banquet in the morning, the crown princess had only exchanged a few words with Wu Hongma, and it was just that her aura was a little overbearing. When they really fought, no one could even think about interfering. Looking at the punches and kicks that were beating Madame Xu like a sandbag, which of the noble women passing by would dare to stop them? Chapter 853. You. Madame Shu barely managed to stabilize herself, and her face kept trembling. All the hair on Shu Quan's body stood on end, and she was so nervous that her fingers curled up slightly. She grabbed her mother, whose cheeks were swollen, and hurriedly apologized to Arbor. Crown Princess, sorry. My mother drank a bit too much at the New Year's banquet, and her mind is still a bit muddled. You're the one who drank too much. Madame Shu didn't appreciate the apology at all, as she swatted her daughter's hand away. She pointed at Wei Ziqin and angrily said, "You're just a village woman, but your daughters are each more vulgar and barbaric than the other. Are you all dead? Why did you let the Crown Princess do it alone?" A cold rebuke sounded from behind the Qiao family's mother and daughters. When this rebuke sounded, Shu Quan felt like her scalp was about to explode. The hidden guards who were secretly observing couldn't help but grumble and hurriedly rushed out. Without another word, they picked up Madame Shu, whose hair was disheveled and her hairpins were disheveled, and gave her a good beating. Madame Shu wailed incessantly, and the spectating madams and noble ladies were all dumbstruck. What's the use of having you follow the Crown Princess? You actually want the Crown Princess to do it herself. Emo Lian walked up with a cold expression. She turned to shoot a glance and hurriedly asked, "Mother, what's wrong? Who angered my mother to this extent?" The moment the Crown Prince finished speaking, the surroundings were dead silent. The madams and noble ladies who were originally watching the commotion all secretly groaned in their hearts, hating themselves for watching the commotion. "Your Highness." Fourth young lady Shu Hui seemed to be panicking as she suddenly knelt down and pleaded for her mother with tears streaming down her face. "Mother only quarreled with the Crown Princess's mother for a bit. It's nothing major. It was the Crown Princess who suddenly made a move." The Crown Prince's abrupt glance at her was really cold. Shu Hui's heart suddenly trembled. Her neck shrunk, and her pupils involuntarily dilated. Fourth younger sister. The great king's first consort shouted to stop her in disappointment. She hurriedly went forward to bow to the Crown Prince and said, "Your Highness, it was my mother who drank a bit too much at noon. Her mind was a bit muddled, and she offended the Crown Princess. Please forgive her. My Lin is only 12 years old, but she's already been scolded for not being able to find a husband." Are these the words of a drunkard? Wei Ziqin was so angry that her whole body trembled. She had never seen such a fierce woman who would joke about her daughter's marriage. Shrew. The Crown Prince flew into a rage, and the surroundings suddenly became deathly silent. Why did great heroine Shu marry a shrew like you? Madame Shu was so scared that she was paralyzed on the ground. She had been beaten black and blue by Arbor, and the others until her face was swollen, and her eyes couldn't even be found. At this time, there was no other expression on her face. Shu Hui was also so scared that her whole body was trembling. She knelt there, not daring to move. Only Shu Quan braced herself and stepped forward. Your Highness, please be careful with your words. If the Crown Prince labeled her as a shrew, then her mother's life could be considered to have come to an end." At this time, Shu Quan truly regretted to the extreme. Why couldn't she restrain her mother, who didn't watch her mouth? Did her mother still think that she was dealing with those concubines in her own home? Someone come, chase Madame Shu and her party out. In the future, they're not allowed to enter the palace without special instructions. The Crown Prince shouted coldly, not leaving Madame Zhuang any face. In so many years of New Year's banquets, Madame Shu was the first person to be chased out by the Crown Prince's order. In the future, how was Madame Shu supposed to go out and meet people? Madame Zhuang was paralyzed on the ground. How could she be willing to leave? Chapter 854. Madame Shu cried until her snot and tears were plastered on her face. At this moment, her image was completely destroyed. Two eunuchs stepped forward and directly picked her up from the ground. Placing their arms around her, they carried her out of Brilliant Sun Hall. Madame Shu kicked her legs and screamed incessantly. This commotion was so loud that Queen Zhao could no longer pretend not to hear. Queen Zhao walked over with elderly nanny Huaxian, green mammy, and several palace maids. Seeing this situation, she couldn't help but feel a headache. Your Majesty the Queen, Your Majesty the Queen. Madame Shu struggled on her deathbed and wanted to pounce on the queen, but she was firmly held down by the two eunuchs. Crown Prince, what are you doing? Actually, Queen Zhao had long known that the Crown Princess and Shu family's mother and daughter were at odds, but she wanted to see how powerful the Shu family's mother and daughter were. Now, it looked like they had suffered a crushing defeat and were completely not a match for the Qiao family's mother and daughter. To be precise, they were no match for the Crown Princess. Take her away. The Crown Prince waved his hand impatiently, and Queen Zhao didn't stop him. Just like this, everyone looked on helplessly as the beggar-like Madame Shu was dragged away while screaming. Shu Hui's small face couldn't help but turn ghastly pale. She couldn't leave or stay in place, so she pitifully raised her head to look at Queen Zhao. Throw her away as well. The Crown Prince pointed at the pale-faced Shu Hui. Queen Zhao's expression changed. My royal son. Prince Mo turned to look at Empress Zhao with an angry expression. He directly said, Royal Mother, if this son's daughter-in-law is wronged in your brilliant Sun Hall every time, then this son won't dare to bring her here in the future. Queen Zhao's expression was angry, and she couldn't help but feel anxious. Nonsense. How did Royal Mother let her be wronged? Wasn't it just a few words with the Shu family's mother and daughter? It's all a misunderstanding. This Crown Princess was too delicate. Empress Zhao was displeased. Madame Shu pointed at my mother's nose and scolded my younger sister for not being able to marry. Does the Queen want to hear it with your own ears? Arbor asked coldly. Queen Zhao's heart skipped a beat as she inwardly scolded Madame Shu for not knowing how to conduct herself. She forced a smile and said, Crown Princess, you've been wronged. Muhu will definitely make it up to you. Arbor said coldly, There's no need for compensation. I only hope that Your Majesty the Queen will punish Madame Shu properly, so that she won't be a frog in a well who doesn't know how high the sky is. Imperial Mother, issue an edict and send an etiquette instructor to Madame Shu. Let her relearn etiquette and rules for 3 months, so that she won't boast about how well-mannered she is. Prince Mo grabbed Empress Zhao's arm and shook it. Empress Zhao looked at her son helplessly. If she were to issue such a decree, it would make everyone in the capital laugh at Madame Shu. Madame Shu had always boasted that she had taught a pair of outstanding girls. However, she herself had to learn the rules from the new when she was old. This was truly ironic. However, if he didn't listen to his son today, it seemed like he wouldn't be able to let go of his resentment. After weighing the pros and cons, Empress Zhao still felt that her son was more important. She was afraid that her precious son really wouldn't come to the brilliant Sun Hall in the future, so she issued an edict to the Shu family. When the bruised and battered Madame Shu received this edict, she was like a bolt from the blue. How she would throw a tantrum and hang herself would be a story for another day. When the night banquet arrived, Arbor, who was in high spirits after a good night's sleep, followed Prince Mo into Clearwater Fine Park. The night fell rather early in the winter. The luminous pearls among the flowers were all lit up, illuminating the surroundings in a blur. Crown Prince, Crown Princess has arrived. Following the announcement, everyone from the 8 great patrician families in the bright main hall uniformly looked towards the entrance. Chapter 855. So many pairs of eyes simultaneously cast their gazes on the Crown Prince and Crown Princess. Friendly, admiring, hostile, and probing gazes intersected. 2 hidden forces even stealthily charged at the two of them in an instant. If one's willpower was weak, they would definitely stagger from the hidden force. That would be a breach of etiquette in front of the court, and also a disadvantage in front of the 8 great patrician families. Unfortunately, the one they wanted to plot against was the Crown Prince, a figure with a cultivation as deep as the sea. Thus, 2 figures rapidly bounced away from their seats with 2 soft chi-chi sounds of rebounding force. The cushions under their butts instantly exploded with 2 bang-bang sounds, and cotton fluff flew all over the floor. Ordinary people looked over in confusion, but cultivators were inwardly alarmed. It was two members of the Hong family who acted to test them. Mo Lian already knew their identities with a glance. Previously, because of Hong Yaoi's incident, he had already ordered people to gather information on all the members of the Hong estate. These two people were the two sons of the Hong family's eldest branch, Hong Riwei and Hong Daowei. Suddenly, a burst of laughter was heard. Duan Yu tilted his head and looked at the two disheveled members of the Hong family across 5 or 6 tables. He clicked his tongue and said, "Oh my, you want to plot against people with such lousy cultivation? Go hide where you can." With that, Hong Riwei and Hong Daowei's faces instantly turned the color of pig liver. Mo Lian coldly glanced at the two members of the Hong family. Holding Arbor's hand, she walked forward. Along the way, they had to pass by the seats of the court officials and the 8 great patrician families. On the left were the court officials and their families. On the right were the 8 great patrician families. Of course, the 8 great patrician families' seating arrangements were also particular. The Talisman patrician family, the Mu clan, the Concealed Weapons and Scouting patrician family, the Duan clan, and the Elixir patrician family, the Qin estate, followed by the medical famed Do clan, the Smelting and Mining patrician families, the Wu clan, and the Hong clan. The Forging patrician families, the Fan clan and the Qiao clan, were at the bottom. That's right, it was the Qiao clan. In her previous life, the Qiao clan's main family was considered one of the great patrician families. When Qiao Dongbua, the head of the main family, saw Qiao Zhongbang and his family, he came forward to greet them. Qiao Zhongbang didn't look any better. When Qiao Dongbua saw Arbor, he immediately stood up from his seat in excitement. However, before he could start exchanging pleasantries with Qiao Mu, he was thoroughly interrupted by the Hong brothers' sudden probing. Arbor's cold gaze swept past Qiao Dongbua without stopping for a moment. She knew almost all of the people from the Qiao family, but she didn't want to talk to any of them. All of a sudden, Arbor's gaze fell on the people beside Qiao Dongbua. To be more precise, it was locked onto a 23-year-old man who wore a white robe and had a gentle smile on his face. Her aura changed in an instant. It was so sudden that it was hard for Prince Mo not to notice it. Her footsteps stopped just like this, so Mo Lian naturally stopped as well. Following her gaze, he met a young man who was nodding slightly with a smile on his lips. Just like that, Qiao Mu's icy gaze fixated on that man, staring fixedly at him. This abnormal deep gaze attracted the attention of everyone around them, even the king and queen, who were sitting far away on the chief seats in the main hall. The white-robed young man stood up with a smile and bowed to the two of them. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.